Welcome. We will. Hold on. Let's turn this off. There we go. We'll call to order the October 18th, 2023 regular meeting of the Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority. First item on the agenda is the roll call. Cindy.
John Ward,
Present.
Carson Schmitz,
Here.
Ward Howenstein,
Present.
Allison Bektish,
Present.
Peter Grenny,
Present.
Kelly McNicholas Curry. Kelly?
I am here on Zoom.
Great, thank you.
Slowly
Great.
getting off mute. Thank you.
Okay, we will move to public comment. Elizabeth.
Live.
3D.
Hey, I'll start with you, Ward. You, I think, brought up in one of the most recent meetings the IGA as the source for answering the question of what does this board do? And I looked at it last night, and it does answer that. It actually answers a lot of things. And one of the things that, I don't know how many of you guys spent time reading it, but I did. And one thing it specifies really specifically, and it goes to great lengths to specify, is the independence of this body from the city and the county. And that's always interesting to me then to further read through it and see how the staff reports to the city manager and the city manager directs the staff. And anyway, it's all there. It's on your website. There are about 7 iterations of the IGA. It further goes on to outline very specifically the responsibilities of this board, which I know is one of the questions that we were kicking around recently. And that is actually more interesting than the kind of contradictory IGA situation, because the responsibilities of this board have been diminished, diluted, and removed rather dramatically since the program's inception in 1982. Really, 2002 was sort of a turning point. But I encourage you, it is on your very own website to see where the responsibilities lie with this board, where they started, what the intent was, where they are today. Today, you are all helpers, assisters, and pretty ceremonial. And for the amount of time and commitment that several of you have made over the course of many years, and for the fresh off the boat newbies, that was an eye-opener to me, the degree to which the responsibilities have been curtailed. Okay, so it's all right there on the website. Secondly, Resolution 7 tonight, 632 Development Fund, buying those properties. Hey, sounds good, but there's no context. Maybe it's something you all have discussed in executive session, therefore there shouldn't be any public context. However, maybe at this stage in the packet there ought to be some context, because it's a recommendation, great. Don't see any problem with the recommendation, but why? Why are those properties empty? Kind of little background. If there's confidential mystery stuff that needs to be private, I totally understand, but context is always good for transparency. Third item, the change to the regulations that you are considering for eligibility and qualifications, page 14, is critical. I couldn't tell you how happy I am to see that. The language is very good. The language appears to be very clear. Obviously, it's in response to the fact that and/or working and/or for a Pitkin County employer, we know that that cannot stand up in court in the state of Colorado. They read and/or as or. So this clarification is critical. I really want to encourage you to make it to clarify that remote work situation. I assume that once, I know there's several steps to making this happen. I assume that as soon as this is adopted, which I hope it will be, this will be reflected immediately to the degree that you get that information, which I don't think you do from the affidavit, but certainly with the monthly random audits as well as future complaints on those issues. That basically, those are big changes, and I would just hope that it gets enacted and then also enforced. And the last thing is a little project I'm working on, which I'm sure you'll all be thrilled to hear, is on chain of title. And we've all known that a property sold is transacted seller to APCHA, APCHA to buyer. And the assessor's database and reporting online, oftentimes it's just the purchase that's recorded by property. However, those reception files aren't chronological. And so you can sort of extrapolate and find that those transactions and the chain of title does exist, they're just not reported. But that's something that I'm talking to the assessor about, just for the clarification, just so that it's consistent and really shows a seller to APCHA, APCHA to buyer. When that buyer sells, it goes back to APCHA, et cetera. Total semantics, but it raises the question, and it's for staff and for all of you, because I don't know who is the one to answer it. Is there ever an instance where APCHA comes into possession of a property and sells it without conducting a lottery? Can that happen?
I'm guessing if there isn't any other bidders.
But it would be posted, of course.
North 40 doesn't have to go to lottery.
Right, RO.
Yeah.
And the right sizing program,
And the right sizing, yeah.
that's why we put it in the regulations.
Right, okay. But anything short of RO, so any category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if it came into by chain of title to APCHA, it would at least have to be posted for a lottery. Is that correct?
It's dependent on the regulations and or the deed restriction attached to that property.
Okay. So there are
Would it
exceptions?
be in, I mean, I guess,
There could be
what if
exceptions.
you
There's an
just,
exception,
yeah,
yes,
right,
there
there
could
could
be
be if you were updating an old deed restriction or something like that.
Yeah.
There's one property that you can like put time in on the HOA and then you kind of get some first dibs. There's some oddities out there. Even if APCHA took it and changed deed restrictions or upgraded the home, eventually it goes to lottery in most situations.
In most, right, not all.
Yes, it would
Yeah.
be unusual, to say the least.
Very, very unusual.
And it would be spelled out fairly clearly, I would have to believe, in the deed restriction for that property, that there could be a transaction outside of the housing authority. Is that what we're saying?
Should be.
And it would still go through
Or it's
APCHA,
silent.
It would be a lottery.
Or it's silent. It's totally silent because and it could be a deed restriction that was done in the 80s.
Yeah, no,
So, yeah.
that's what I'm getting at. So something's done in the 80s. Does that preclude it from being in the lottery?
It could be, yes. If it doesn't specifically state it, yes.
If it doesn't specifically state it, it defaults to no lottery, or it defaults?
You would have to tell me exactly which one you're talking about, and
Okay.
I would have to do research on it.
Okay, that's great. I will be back to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I just will add, so as John and I, having sat on the previous board, I would say that this most recent iteration of the IGA has granted more power to this board. I mean, previously, whenever we would approve things, it was a big frustration of ours that we would approve it and then would have to go and be blessed by the city and the county, right? And so now we don't have that. So
Bring back the politicos back, gave us a little more.
Right,
Yeah.
but it's amazing to see 7 iterations of this.
It's
and
changed
the
over the
varying
years,
We
for
went,
sure.
we went from
responsibilities.
commissioners and city councilmen on the board to off the board to back on the board again.
Right, no, it's
and
definitely
then I would just say
confusing.
too, on the for the regulations, the resolution. So once those are approved, there'll be a first reading and then a second reading, and then immediately they go into effect.
That's great. Well, I
Yeah.
encourage you to do it. I think clarification makes it better for everybody.
Can I add one caveat, though? There are deed restrictions that do not relate to the most up-to-date regulations. So the regulation changes might not go with everyone because
Right.
some deed restrictions don't relate to them.
Yeah, I know some of those deed restrictions are so old and so funky that they preclude a whole bunch of other things. Okay, well, I'll dig further and let you know. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Kelly, sorry, I didn't see it with your background there.
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate Elizabeth's input. And, I think there's lots of ways that housing authorities can be organized and that their governance structures can be formulated. It always seems that there's hanging out there whether APCHA should be an independent authority with its own funding. And, if there was a community a community campaign organized around that, I feel like that would be the space to make an idea like that gain traction. I just don't feel like we heard that in the last iteration of the IGA. There was a lot of discussion out there about that type of structure, and it didn't manifest. And so the same way any special district would organize, you know, I think that there's numerous ways that APCHA can be organized, and right now this is how it's working.
Yeah, and mine isn't a judgment. It was just more of the fact that we've all, in the past couple of weeks, talked about the clarification. And the clarification is in there in the IGA, and just as a data point, to point out that all of the former IGAs are on that website, and the responsibilities have hopped around, which is part of feeding the confusion, I believe. So,
Tom?
thank you.
Tom, do you have a comment there?
Is he muted? He's muted.
He might be frozen. Well, I can see him here. He's frozen on my screen. Oh,
We'll go back to it.
Tom, are you there?
Tommy, can you hear me?
All right, we'll come back to Tom.
God, that's a pretty dated reference, that one. Told me by the who.
All right, we'll come back to Tom. So we'll go to
That's pretty dated.
director's comments. Kelly?
Sorry, none today. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Peter?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the comments, Elizabeth. I hope we'll hear for Resolution 7 tonight. Will we get more context on that? Is that? I just read both these and I didn't really, I understood the ask, but the recommendation, but was curious.
Yeah, we can.
From my-
we can-
We can tell a little, but
Okay.
we can't
We'll
tell a
have
lot.
discussion on it for sure.
Okay, great. And then as far as the deed restrictions, that just brought to mind for me, thinking of the compliance report, which I again hope moves to the front of the website, webpage. All those, I think there's been 50 complaints so far this year. And for all those people that are inclined to make a complaint, do we advise them to look up the deed restriction first so they understand, you know, what that deed restriction is, so that they're not making a complaint? And so how does that work? Because if we have so many different deed restrictions and people are like, well, this person, and you don't know that they're in violation or not, it makes it awkward for them to make a complaint and not know.
That's the great part and the bad part about anonymous complaints. It allows someone to be anonymous to do a complaint, but it doesn't allow them to have that conversation with staff that says, hey, unfortunately, they're allowed to do what they're doing because of these provisions in their deed restriction. If we do speak with them, we do talk them through that and explain why they're allowed to do what that person's doing, for example, but we can't always, because a lot of them are just coming in through the computer.
Yeah, and that's, I would say, the reason that we have the compliance report on the website is so that when you make the anonymous complaint, you get the complaint ID, you can track it through, and then you can see this wasn't enforced because it was an old deed restriction.
Okay.
And that's
And-
one of the big issues with the whole program, right, is it's so old. Deed restrictions
Right.
have evolved. City council and county commissioners have had input in some deed restrictions along the way. And, you know, people live under one, so they think everybody lives under the same deed restriction. So that creates a lot of distrust, a lot of
Right.
Could we,
animosity.
in
between
the
all of
interest
them.
of transparency and making that better for the community as a whole, could we make those deed restrictions more readily available?
I mean, they're right there on the
I
website.
think they're on
generally.
the
But,
website.
but right here where it says report a concern, I don't know, from the home check, it looks like you probably have a back end, like make a form system where you said you want your name, your email, all these. I wonder if there's space for a subhead that says all, like we have gazillion properties with a gazillion different deed restrictions to look up the one you're concerned with, click here, just as part of the report a concern block.
Down.
Well, they
Well-
can find them all on the clerk and recorder's
Yeah.
website.
Yeah, they're
I mean,
right.
that's
They're
the-
literally right next door.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you hopped on your computer at night to go make a concern and you didn't know that everybody was operating under different ones, you wouldn't also know to physically
Yeah.
go to the
I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
recorder's office.
Yeah, Peter, in our experience, you know, most of the complaints are not based on interpretations of the deed restriction.
Okay.
I mean, that can happen, but it's generally not that.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, so I mean, it's a valid point, but the vast majority of the complaints are more focused on either working, or frankly, I don't like my neighbor, and I'd like you to investigate them for some unspecified problem or crime.
Okay. Thank you.
Or
Yeah, I think that it's been tested that you can't remain anonymous. I think if somebody has a complaint and they pursue it, that the person that made the complaint has to be revealed. It was up on Juan Street, I think, that there was a test case for that. So if somebody really pursues it, I think that they have a right to meet their
Right.
accuser.
If you ask us to investigate it, we will investigate it, and you can remain anonymous. But if it turns into something other than that, yeah, you'll have to eventually unveil yourself. But we will come back to you as best we can and tell you what's going on.
Our system is anonymous, so if you file a complaint through Home Track, we have no way to get back, and Andrew can speak to that if you don't mind for a second.
Yeah, you don't have to be an authenticated user in the system, so you don't have to have a login as part of Home Track to submit a complaint. So when you're an unauthenticated user, it doesn't connect anything in the back end for us to be able to know who submitted it at that point.
But if you're not satisfied with our response and you want to take it further, then then that's a different process entirely.
Yeah. My comments this afternoon, kind of put on the radar for future meetings some discussions on AMI, the categories, the range of the categories, all of these on the rental program side, that there's a large spread in some of the categories on AMI, and that the same rent is charged to somebody on the lowest end of that category as on the highest end of the category. And to open a discussion of the possibility of having your rent tied to a percentage of actual AMI, say 27%, 30% is considered housing burden. On some of the higher categories with people at the high end of that category, the percentage that they're paying is well above what a percentage of income that somebody at a lower category and the lower end of that category is paying. So looking for equity in the program, and perhaps in the future looking at tightening up, making the range of the AMI within the categories a little bit closer, but in discussions with some people at the city, an interest in looking at the possibility of having your rent as a portion of your actual income. And I know, Matthew, if we go that direction, it's going to be an administrative headache, but the end of it is, the end result would be that there's equity throughout the program as far as how much you're paying in relation to your AMI. So look forward to having further discussions about that in the future.
So the tentative long-term agenda has February 7th begin the discussion on the affordability standard. So I think it's
Okay. Well,
tied to that
I'll
conversation.
yeah, I'll hammer that out, and we'll get together ahead of that. I'll try to get together with the board members individually ahead of that and see where we can be going with that. Thank you.
You're gonna have to get a legal opinion on that as well, because I do not think we can tell Centennial or Castle Ridge, I'm sorry, you have to lower your rent because of this person in it. So, and that could be with some other, the deed restrictions that we have out there, that one unit here and one unit there as well, because they're based on a specific category. So we will need a legal opinion on that for sure, if there's something that we can say, well, and it could be that, well, I'm sorry that this person makes too less of money, I'm not gonna rent to them. I need somebody who's making more money. So then you're gonna have people who are not making as much money, not being able to get into housing. That's my concern as
Yeah,
well.
and I know that Centennial, when it was purchased, the rental program, they want to charge a different rate for different categories, different units within the same category. So it's a complex system and a lot of discussions that need to be hammered out. And obviously, Tom, more billable hours.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ward. Allison?
Good afternoon. I have a question about when and how the board should find out if we're being sued. Because I found out in the paper this morning for something that was filed last week.
We only heard about it yesterday.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we only
So
heard about it yesterday.
is there
Like last night.
a reason to or not to
I mean,
send something out to the board?
I don't think, if I hear about it, I'll let you know when I hear about it, but I don't think you actually need to know. I don't, it's a normal, perfectly acceptable way for them to escalate it.
I guess my assumption is that we're sued way more than I know. I'm
No.
not saying it's not normal.
No.
I'm just saying I think
you've-
especially because this comes to like, what do you think APCHA does,
Right.
and the difference between the board
Yeah.
and the staff and the regulations and the deed restrictions. So I think if people know that the board I sit on is being sued and I know nothing about it, then it seems, I don't think that helps our communication
That's a good
with
point.
who's involved in what. And so even finding out in the paper and then also getting something from staff
That's a very valid,
would be
that's
helpful.
a very valid point also.
And
Yeah, he was served last night.
I do think that the iterations of the IGA and the role of the board, it's not just like we are sitting here asking what do we do? I just came into this room and I don't know what to do. It's the community doesn't know all those different distinctions when they say APCHA. And so I think that's more, and I thought we were having a comms person come to the meetings regularly.
So I talked to Carolyn, and we're working on something for that very topic.
Fantastic. So just in response to public comment, I think one of the hopes is that we are better able to explain it to everybody, right? Not just ask ourselves that. And also, I think if it can't go in with the report of concern block or something, I do think that's a great next press release or fun Facebook blast. Did you know there's 47 different deed restrictions in the APCHA program? Like fun facts like that, where that's like getting blasted in different ways. Because if you don't know that you don't know, and so like you go to report concern if it's not being, if you've never seen that somewhere. So hopefully just a more fun fact, numbers, stats, things that you can get out. I actually have some questions about when we make regulation changes, if it's best practices for them to immediately go into effect, especially if they are kind of in reaction to seeing that like we do have this ongoing problem and people are going through the system of appeals or something on something we're about to change. I think there's merit in having a delayed, and that'll come regulation by regulation. I think we can change grammar immediately. And then did anyone, 3 days now of the open period for the repairs, was there a mad rush? It's going to be in your updates. Again, I think we extended to a 3-week period instead of 2, right? Because again, press release went out on the day to get your stuff in. I'm very glad we're not doing it in first come, first serve, because that wouldn't have been effective for people who read about it, then thought, oh, I should go call someone, get my quotes. That's a week of free time just there. So those are my pontifications on APCHA for now.
Okay. Tom is back. I think Tom would have several comments on a couple of those things.
Great. And are we able to see the non-video participants along the top or so? I just really like to know who's in the meeting, especially with our fellow board members and press. Exactly, something like that. Thank you so much.
I'll just take a stab at 2 of those. One, I think for us, for notification of the lawsuit. I mean, I obviously we can't discuss anything, right? And it may be just a copy of the lawsuit, FYI.
That's fine. Yeah.
And then I was going to.
Like, are we going to get called up to test? What do you mean we can't discuss anything?
You can't discuss
You
it.
can't discuss anything about the
That's all the more
lawsuit.
reason I should know. Like, So sorry. So if a subject is brought up that I think is over and yet it is still actually going on in court, I'd love to know that I'm not supposed to be talking about it.
Well, Tom has got his hand up right here. And
It's frozen again.
looks like he's frozen again.
He's got to replace that little IBM
And, so Tom, we lost you
desktop
again.
computer.
Is Tom still running Windows 95?
I'll just say too, on the, from
So-
the things going into effect immediately, that is I'm pretty sure that's a legal, like, once we approve it, it's in effect, because that's the regulations. It's been read twice. There's public comment.
Well,
I mean, I guess we could set you're saying
Right.
set a specific date
Yep.
to say this goes into effect on.
He keeps
Exactly.
freezing.
Okay. We can do that.
By the way, Tom just got served late last night.
And we have not,
We
we
haven't
have
seen
not
it.
seen the.
Yeah, we haven't seen
Thank you. And I didn't think you were withholding. It made me wonder if we should be notified or if we shouldn't be notified. When and how
Yeah.
should we be notified, including by reading the paper?
By the paper, apparently.
You might not always pick it up, right? So I want
Well, I
to.
think in that case, it wasn't picked up, it was,
Press released
yeah,
by Chris.
right. That's the,
All right, John.
No real comment. I am excited. This is my other job, but and I think it's going to behoove us on all employers that have the wherewithal to work to solve kind of this housing crunch throughout the valley. But we're going to P&Z, or actually county commissioners or Carbondale trustees next week for a new building in Carbondale, which will include 16, I call them workforce housing units for employees of my bank, but also, it's certainly not going to be filled up right away, so it's just 16 other units that add to kind of that workforce housing stock, and it certainly doesn't solve the problem. Hopefully it helps, but I think it's behooving on the private and public sector to figure out ways to help. The bank has franchise value and has need for employees, and so to be able to solve it and add to the stock and not just take stuff off the market that's already on the market's important. So.
Great. Tom has got his hand up. We'll try again.
Can't figure out why we can't get him.
I know.
Can he
No.
just call you?
Yeah, maybe.
We've done that before with Francie and some other people that we couldn't get audio. They just call you and.
That's Tom, Andrew, that's his number.
Tom,
Carson, this is Tom. Can you hear me?
I can. Go ahead.
Okay, because I was on Zoom and for some reason you couldn't hear me. So, and I was the meeting itself was cutting in and out. So I've called in. I'm sorry, but this is the best I can do right now. So I know some legal questions have been raised. I don't know if there's anything you want me to address at this point or not.
So I think we just had a couple of questions. One was just in reference to the lawsuit that was in the paper today, and if it is possible or necessary for the board, or not necessary, but I guess legal for the board to be, or when the board can be notified of that, and how that should happen.
Okay, so I found out about it the same time you did. So there was no prelude to this. I was aware of a deadline for an appeal of the board's decision in the Thinger case was approaching. I think tomorrow was a deadline. It was filed today. So I will, once I have received a copy of the complaint, I will forward copies to all members of the board, as well as appropriate staff members. But I haven't seen it yet, so I know no more than you. It's a typical, procedurally anyway, it's a typical Rule 106 case where you get an appeal from a decision of the board in district court, record review. And the court will consider the briefs of the parties and make a decision.
Thanks, Tom. And I didn't really need specifics on this, just best practices. And it sounds like when you get complaints, you'll forward them on to us, and that's our system.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's standard practice for me to either send the complaint on to all the board members or to ask for the board to convene an executive session to discuss pending litigation. So since the last time we had a discussion on pending litigation, nothing has been filed except this one, and as I say, I haven't even seen it yet. So as appropriate, well, certainly I'm sending it around to the copies of the complaint around to all the board members, and if it's inappropriate to have an executive session, just
Great. You do a much better job of being an attorney than I do. All right. So I just had two comments. One, just have been talking with staff about finding a new 4506T vendor to make sure that we're pulling the transcripts so that all the tax returns that we're getting are the actual tax returns that are being submitted to the IRS. And part of that discussion is I think going to be, are we comfortable adding that $8 fee or $12 fee, whatever it ends up being, to the application, or is that something that the board wants to fund separately? So I don't think it's something that we need to necessarily discuss tonight, but I do think it is worth us pulling those transcripts and making sure we're getting legitimate tax returns and not something that's just been generated. Because I did receive a complaint this week that
Photoshop tax returns, and this can verify them somehow.
So what it is people give us the tax returns, and then we go to the IRS and say, give us the transcript.
Okay.
And so then we can look at the two and say, yes, they match, or no, they didn't. And you're either being truthful or you're not, and we know. So
Is there punishment for?
It's fraud.
it's
Yeah.
fraud. Yeah.
I mean, there's our punishment, yeah. Well, you have to be truthful to us, yes, if you want to avail yourself of this public benefit.
Okay, and then the only
That's books.
the only other question that I had was on, so I got an email. I'm on the board of my HOA, and I got an email from Matthew about the Essential Home Repair Pilot Grant Program. So thank you for sending that out to our HOA, who then sent it along. So just one follow-up on here. So at the email, you had said we will be doing a program for HOA capital reserve assessments in the coming year. So I was just going to see, have we, in the city council, has there been any progress on the, an HOA reserve study and funds for APCHA to be providing reserve studies to, to HOA boards? I know we've talked about that several times. I mean, has there been any movement on that?
We have the RFP up
Right.
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have the RFP
Yeah.
out now, to be closing, I think in November, and
Okay.
we have a pre-bid meeting.
Have we gotten any updates on that?
Liz?
Just curious. If we don't have them,
Yeah,
that's
I'm not
fine.
sure.
I just was curious.
I don't have an update for you on that. We
Okay.
can check it out.
Well,
Oh, Liz?
I could jump in quick.
Thanks, Liz.
I mean, there's not much to update on, just because the RFP is currently out, and we have a pre-bid meeting coming up on November 1st, and then it will close in December, where we'll select a firm.
awesome. Thank you. Thanks for sending that out.
Wasn't the original time frame expected to have the report done by the end of 2024 or early 2025?
The actual reports
The actual
that
report.
that's what we're hoping, is that we can have the person chosen and contract with them, and they can come up during the spring and do them, and we can have everything done before the end of 2024. That's what the hope is.
Great.
And we would be coming back to the board with an ask with regards to whether you want to provide the appropriation to either pay all of it for the HOAs or a portion of the HOAs. Once we know what it's going to cost, that's why we're waiting for the RFPs to come through and for us to review them.
Okay.
Then we'll come back in front of the board or the city council and the board of county commissioners.
Perfect.
Can I ask one question related to
Go
that?
ahead.
So is there two studies? The HOAs are doing a study up there the health of their own HOA and reporting that to a consultant that's looking at all 80 HOAs and where they are in terms of reserves.
I mean, in an ideal world, HOAs should have a very good idea of their capital reserves,
Yeah.
themselves. But we live in the real world, and so we're trying to help them get to that place, which is the purpose of the RFP.
Yep.
Okay.
Great.
This is probably going to be in your report too. When do you go in front of city council with the APCHA budget? Okay, never.
Saving it for later.
He's on it.
Matthew.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I will be going before City Council on October 30th to do the budget. And then we have tentatively scheduled for you guys on, when was it? December 13th. And, November 8th.
Yeah.
November 8th. And then I did go and I had a nice chat on the budget and other things with the Board of County Commissioners, not once but twice since I spoke to you last. So it was very nice to get over to the county building. No, actually, what am I talking about? This very room. Here I was. So yeah, we had a good discussion on the budget, and then I updated a bunch of other stuff. So that was great to talk to them about that. The Essential Grants pilot program is live. We've had 11 applications so far, so that's great. And we will be meeting to look at those. We have some time blocked off once it closes. And this was also, I think, a good indication of better coordination with the City of Aspen, communications people, and also it also shows that the work we put in to get all the communications emails and build up a list for the HOAs is also working. So the fact that I was able to blast that straight out to a listserv of our HOA contacts, which was great. So that's great. That's really good. And then Bethany wanted to talk about a few things.
I know we'll give you a more in detailed update at another time, but as far as the audit program, 31 out of 34 audits have been received back. 2 we're still working with the owners on, just gathering final documentation, and 1 owner we're doing follow-up on. So 31 out of 34 at this moment are in full compliance. Another 23 went out on Monday, so it's a 2-week turnaround, I think, to get documents back. So we'll see how that goes, but we are sending them out. And I mean, as of right now, 31 out of 34 are in perfect compliance. 2 are just waiting on a couple extra documents, and we're following up with
And when
one.
did we start that?
Jackie's July 27th.
Great.
And we were hoping to do 5 a month, but it sounds like you just sent out another 20.
23 on
So
Monday.
what sort of,
I wanted to see what the workload would be with them coming back in, and because they're mostly compliant, the workload has allowed me to go from 5 to 12, 24, but one of them got knocked out of this round, so it was 23.
Great.
These are the random
These
audits.
are just
These are
random
random
audits.
audits.
It's generated by property.
Great.
From Home Track is spitting out. Or
Yeah.
Well, and
It's based upon address, so completely randomized.
Great.
is that audit information going into Home Track?
Updated emails and phone numbers from the affidavit make their way into Home Track. What information exactly would you want in Home Track, I guess is the question. Because they're providing documentation that says they're in compliance, so the documents are going into Home Track.
Okay.
So but it's not going necessarily into their person account in Home Track, but everything they submit to us lives in Home Track.
Okay.
Does that make sense, I
Yep.
guess? Okay.
Well, it should go on the website.
Yeah,
Just
it should be.
31 reviewed,
Yeah, we were
31,
planning on doing that towards the
Yeah.
end of the year.
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
if you find one, then
Right.
we found one, right?
Kelly.
Thanks. I'm wondering is there benefit for the information to go into their person account in Home Track? You know, say for example, you've audited someone who's lived there for 5 years. They've provided updated information, and now they want to bid.
They would still
You
have
know,
to.
they're sorry.
No,
Go
they'd
ahead.
still have to submit a brand new qualification packet if they were going to bid. All we are getting is tax returns, W-2s, and employment verification, as well as a pay stub, but we'd still want from a new purchase bank accounts and anything else from an asset or a liability standpoint. So it's not a complete qualification packet. So we also wouldn't want to change their category just based upon this documentation. That would be the only change we would make necessarily on their person account or on their application account.
So they may still not be within their income category that they bought in, but they're
They
compliant?
don't have to be.
But they don't
So
have
it's-
to be.
Right.
Yeah, they don't have to be.
And, okay.
We're making sure that they're working in the county, that there's not any real estate showing up on the tax returns.
Okay.
That's what we're,
That's all I have.
okay. Cindy, anything on rental or sale units?
We keep adding additional sales units every week because we have had turnover with Burlingame 3. So it behooves everybody to sign up for notifications on that. I don't think we're adding any rentals this week. I do know that you can still submit interest on our website for our low-income housing tax credit, because even though I think we've offered them all out, we're still going through qualifications, so they're not totally full yet. So you can still go on our website and submit interest for some of those rentals.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to consent calendar. So we'll go ahead and separate out resolution number 7 as a separate item. So we'll keep the minutes of September 20th, 2023, and the minutes of October 4th, 2023 together. Any additions, changes, discussion on the minutes from September 20 or October 4?
I move to approve.
Okay, I have a motion to approve.
Second.
Second from John.
Okay. John,
Aye.
Kelly. I know
Aye.
she's saying aye. Carson,
Yes.
Allison, and Ward.
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes. We have approval of resolution number 7, appropriating funds from the 632 APCHA Development Fund up to but not exceeding $160,000 for the purchase of 161 Stock Parkway Unit 201, Burlingame Ranch. An additional amount of $25,000 for the repair of the unit, not to exceed $1,600 for delinquent property taxes to avert the sale at a publicly held auction on November 2nd, 2023. Bethany, Matthew, Cindy?
Cindy, do you want to take it?
This is a property at Burlingame 2 that the owner has not lived in the unit for a while. It is personal issues that we cannot discuss. The unit is in need of a lot of repair, and it was because of the issues surrounding the owner, it was felt that it was a lot easier for the sale to go to APCHA to fix the unit, and then go through the lottery process on this unit, on this property. With some of these, for us to deal with some of these hard case issues that we've run into with some of these units, it's a little bit easier for us to do that. And then, because in the long run, we usually can at least break even on all of our costs.
Okay.
So there's really not a downside on this. And also with regards to the property taxes, it's really, really important, even though the deed restriction would stay if somebody buys it, to have to go through with the person who might buy that and not understand the deed restriction, it might cost us a lot more to do that. That's why doing it this way, it's a little bit smoother.
Is this 3 years of taxing?
I know it's more than one.
But there's a 3-year statute on
Yeah,
that, so
yeah.
it's either gotta be 3 years where you'd worry
Right.
about the buyer being able to take title.
Right, right.
25 grand, how big's the unit?
It's a 2-bedroom, category 2 unit, 2-bedroom, 1 bath.
I mean, I would think 25,000 to flip a unit is low, actually.
And The price is low as well. Is that just buying out the mortgage? It's not the cost of the.
There's actually no mortgage on this property.
Okay.
And we've actually frozen the price of this property because it's been out of compliance for a while.
It'll remain Cat 2. We'll be able to sell it for more than 161.
Right.
Plus 25. It sold for 231 when it sold.
We should be able to recoup our costs.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
But that's great that we're getting lower than.
Yeah, I think it's good that we're not putting this back into the inventory in a state of disrepair.
We've also found that working with a compliance case, that having APCHA be the buyer and then be able to sell it to another owner is a much more pleasant experience for all parties involved.
And that is via lottery when it's ready.
Yes.
Kelly has her hand.
Kelly?
I just want to clarify, because in the packet, there is an Exhibit A that looks irrelevant attached to the memo. So I just want us to be clear that that should be stricken and that we're just dealing with the one-page Resolution 7.
Oh, I 100% agree that was the wrong one.
Thank you
So-
for bringing that up, Kelly. I was
Yes.
super confused.
Resolution number 3. Exhibit
Yeah.
A,
Well, I was
resolution
like,
number
do
3.
we need to continue that because it wasn't noticed, but then I
Jury
think
signed
it's
that,
just
Carson.
in there incorrectly.
Absolutely not.
We already own those.
How often does this come up? I'm just curious. Where?
From a compliance case that APCHA takes ownership.
Yeah.
Gosh, I've been here 5 years and maybe we've done it, this might be the second or third.
Usually we get them through an actual foreclosure.
Okay.
This one, there's no mortgage on it. So it's, or we would get it through a foreclosure from an HOA. There are back HOA dues on this. They haven't done a lien on the property yet. We want them to do the lien before we actually would close on this property, so that the current owner would be assessed those back HOA dues.
They can only leave it up
But
6
usually we
months,
get
right?
them through a foreclosure. This one is something that because of the situation with the current owner, we felt that this was the most appropriate way to go through and get this back into compliance.
They can only lean, the HOA can only lean it up 6 months, correct?
Yeah.
How
And
far
they-
back is this?
I know it's a lot more than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cindy, I think I heard you say it was Burlingame 2, but the reso says Burlingame 1.
And it is, I take that back. It's Burlingame 1. It's on Mining Stock Parkway.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're absolutely correct. It's Burlingame 1.
And can you just clarify one more time where the numbers came, where the 160 came from, where the 25 came from, 25,000?
It's really estimates
Okay.
on it. So and Pam has been in the unit a few times and knows some of the issues that need to be taken care of, along with the property manager and a couple of other people that have been in it. So whether once we really get into it, whether it's going to be more, I don't know. We're hoping that it's not. We're hoping that this is a pretty solid cost for this.
And I'm just kind of talking out loud because I have the understanding that we can't reveal too much, but the owner, by not going through lottery, is perhaps getting less money than if this went straight to lottery at the Cat 2 allowance.
The appreciated value stopped a while ago.
Okay.
And because of some of the issues with the unit, the price was lowered a little bit as
Right.
well.
They're
because of
taking a
that.
good deal knowing that
Yes.
people will likely pass and
Yes.
they might not get anything. And sorry, just to tie the thread, I think this ideally, if we're able, happens more than in the past, because I think what's happened in the past is the unit's been in disrepair. People are desperate enough to take one that they will bid and will pay max price and won't get any concessions. I feel like I kind of got roped into this situation because they won. And so this takes away that kind of
Yes.
panic. I won. I have to do it. I have to, like, what bank is going to even give me a loan for something like this? But I can't let this go. It's my only opportunity. So in a way, If APCHA can afford it and get, reimbursed in it, this is a great system. And technically is the system. APCHA always gets it first. So this is a great, to me,
Right.
solution.
Well, I mean, that goes to that's kind of our pilot program we try to do in Woody Creek, right? And it should be on every unit that is in disrepair, that's gonna cost money. But what's the deed restricted value, max value on this today?
Today,
I mean, you said it froze, but we don't have a number.
I don't really,
But to me, that, if we can get our money back, that's kind of a model for all of it. Anything that's in shitty
no, it's
shitty
not gonna
state.
do that.
We shouldn't pass that on to the burden to the buyer because I gotta get my unit, I gotta get my tow hold, I gotta own something. APCHA should put it into a state,
I'm
a
sorry, I
quality
didn't
state,
really
and
know.
the seller should not get
Prefer that they did
full
that.
proceeds, period. We should control that sale 100%. I mean, I think we've said this a lot, but
Isn't that how it works? Like, they don't get the full price, you deduct what the repairs are to bring it back into.
no, you put it in the lottery and
Well, but
I'll go to the next person.
that's why we have the inspection
That's why we started the
Right.
inspection, but we
Right.
should be enforcing
Exactly.
that with, you're selling it to us and here's what APCHA will pay.
And that's basically new 2023, right?
And this really is kind of a negotiation we're trying to negotiate this a little bit with the current owner, so I hesitate to put that out there, I honestly do.
Yeah.
What was the value?
That's why I hesitate to really put that out there, because we are in negotiations with the owner.
I'll show the assessor.
Yeah, because the assessors,
So for the assessor's website, which we are willing to share because it's public knowledge at the moment, is 152,700.
Okay, great.
And then just for public information as well, the 632 APCHA Development Fund, how is that funded and how is it looking? What portion of that fund are we saying yes to?
I'm gonna have to get that information from Finance Department, because we have used it to purchase 213 Woody Creek. We are now also working with Clayton Homes with regards to one of the homes, 215, which went through the foreclosure fund, will come out of the 150 fund when we replace that home. The 213, when we replace that home next year, it will come out of the 632 fund. Right now, I know that there's over $1 million in it. So and it's in the budgets that we have, what the amount is on that, so.
That ballpark is
Right,
helpful, thank you.
right.
You haven't balanced the checkbook?
Finance is really good at taking care of that.
Can we discuss at another time what you were saying, like this should be the model going forward? Because my understanding was that people don't receive full value based on the condition of the unit if it needs repairs, but that's not standard practice.
So right now, Pam Gable, our sales manager, does a really good job working between the buyer and the seller to negotiate the price down a little bit based upon repairs that come up on the inspection. And so 99% of the time, I would say, the seller is willing to work with the buyer to reduce the price by a certain amount based upon what the inspection says. APCHA's just stepping in to do this in the middleman, basically, because of a compliance situation in this case.
But there are certain severe issues that you just won't even be allowed to
Right,
list until they're
correct.
corrected,
Right.
right? So,
Which is new, that's somewhat
right,
new.
which is new. Right, but the carpet needs to be replaced. Right, that would be something that's
Okay,
a
2,000.
negotiation between the buyer and the seller. The window's broken, you're not gonna be able to list the property for sale.
But the situation you were describing, Allison, where people feel like they're left with the bag to make all these repairs, how does that happen?
Well, I think we've been addressing it in the course of this year through having the inspection pre-listing and the ability for APCHA to step in this way.
Right, because previously there was no inspection pre-listing, and so the property got listed, and whatever issues were found would be found after the property was under contract.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's great.
And so the idea is to stop some of those, which is what we're seeing here today.
Great.
Good work.
Okay, so it would take a motion, if someone wants to, there's a recommendation on page 12, noting resolution number 7 and not resolution number 3.
Thank you.
I'll move to, and recommend board approve resolution Resolution 07, Series of 2023, appropriating funds from the 632 APCHA Development Fund up to but not exceeding $160,000 for the purchase of 161 Mining Stock Parkway, Unit 201, Burlingame Ranch 1. An additional $25,000 for the repairs of the unit, and not to exceed $1,600 for the delinquent property taxes to avert the sale at a publicly held auction on November 2nd, 2023.
And then do you want to reference attachment?
Well,
A second.
Attachment.
referencing, it's not an attachment, it's Resolution 07.
It's just resolution, yeah, it's not an attachment. Ignore,
Referencing
ignoring it,
resolution
exhibit
Number
A.
7, Series of 2023.
There we go. Thank you. A motion from John,
Second.
second from Ward, and it's a roll call vote.
Okay. Ward,
Yes.
Allison,
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to discussion on regulation changes.
Okay,
Beth-
Andrew, can you throw up the PowerPoint so that all of you at home that are watching can watch and see what we're looking at? Thank you. Okay, so we are
Can
going.
I interrupt 1 second, Carson? Can
Tom,
you
go
hear me?
ahead.
It's Tom. Yeah, I just, I'm sorry to interrupt, but because of the way I'm connected to this meeting, I won't be able to raise my hand to want to make a comment, so you'll just have to be cognizant of asking me a question when you think it'd be illegal.
Yeah, feel free to jump in.
Now just chime in like I do.
I'll try not to do that, but if I think it's
Great.
Okay, so APCHA staff is proposing a slew of new regulation changes. This is the discussion period. There is a first reading and then a second reading after that fact. Just to make any clarifications, you can, as when we get down the pipeline, say this regulation doesn't take effect for 6 months or 2 weeks or whatever you might like, but normally they take effect right after the second reading if nothing else is stated. Staff is aware that there might need to be the addition of some definitions or other clarifying statements based upon tonight's conversation, but a lot of these you all are seeing for the first time. So we do know that between now and the November 8th meeting, there might be some clarifying definitions or whatnot that you see at that point, and I will mention those as we get there. So Andrew's gonna slide us through to the next slide. The first one we're gonna talk about is receiving a public benefit. There's been a change in Colorado state law, which states that even if you are not lawfully present in the United States, you are still eligible for state or local public benefits, which includes public housing. So our current regs stated that you had to be in the United States legally in order to be eligible for state or local benefits.
LPR, not just legal.
Sorry, yes. And that is no longer consistent with Colorado state law. So we are recommending that this goes into our regs.
Allison.
Kelly has her hand up too.
Okay.
Currently, is what section, if any, says whether you need to be a citizen or not to apply to own an APCHA?
It's
home?
it's actually bizarrely located down in the ID section, and it says you need to have, you show legal permanent residence or U.S. citizenship, but it's in the ID section, so it really
ID?
ID.
So it would really be striking that.
What IDs you would show?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, so this, as we're redlining, that's striking section blah, 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 blah,
Just,
blah.
that's all we have to do is just get rid of
Okay,
that.
and so when we see the actual resolution, it'll say exactly what we're, the
We'll
motion
show
will
the
be to
addition
strike.
of this
Okay,
and then the striking. We're also
Perfect.
putting this in a place that makes a lot more sense.
This is
fantastic.
state statute, right? So
State
it's
statute.
being taken away. Your ID section really isn't statute. It's
Right.
provide this information, right?
Yeah.
How
So-
does that relate to actually buying a house? Can a
Ask our mortgage brokers.
We do it with
Yeah.
a TIN.
TIN?
You have to
Yeah.
have a
Right.
social security number or a tax number.
Okay.
The IRS will give people the tax ID number,
Okay.
undocumented people, and because the IRS wants undocumented people to still
Pay
pay
their
taxes.
taxes.
But you try to match it up too, because you
Right.
get paycheck stubs and
Yeah.
And it will
W-2s
be-
that don't match the TIN number that,
It will be a
Right.
little harder, I'm sure, just to show working in Pitkin County, because if you're working off the books in Pitkin County, so, it is gonna be a bit more of a headache for us, but we're very confident
well,
it can be done.
most are gonna have W-2s
Right.
and tax forms, but what
the-
the mismatch sometimes comes in, and we've done a lot of these, the employer has a TIN number,
Right,
the applicant has a different TIN
number, yeah,
right, and you want them to match,
right.
'cause that's what's getting reported.
How does this work in families where only one person maybe doesn't have U.S. citizenship or legal documents?
Then the person who, how will it work in the future, or how it works now, or both?
How is it working right now? Like,
It's really complicated.
okay.
And we're doing,
Right now, if you had a married couple, only the one that was here legally could be on the title to the home or the deed if it
Okay.
was an ownership. And from a rental standpoint, they likely wouldn't qualify because both names had to be on the lease, and we couldn't let both names on the lease because of what is currently in
Okay.
the APCHA regs. So this would, I see the biggest change in this not necessarily from the ownership side, but from a rental side.
Great.
Because we often deny folks who are not here legally rental units because of the current regs.
Great. So more of our workforce ideally will get into workforce housing because of this change.
and the current regs even exclude DACA recipients that, for example, Aspen celebrity chef Byron Gomez is a dreamer, and he is not eligible under the way it's written currently, because he does not have legal permanent residence or citizenship.
Okay. And then also, I guess, to the ownership side, if a bank gives both names on the loan, but right now we're only putting one name on the deed, or we're only letting that family bid for, minus one of the household, like kids, mom, dad, but we're only doing 3-bedroom instead of 4, or something, like you're not counting them as one of the family?
From an occupancy standpoint, no, we're still counting them as
Okay.
an occupant. We just haven't been letting them stay on title. So.
Okay. I don't really know what that means.
Kelly?
Thanks. I think this is an important change. And I'm grateful that you guys have brought it forward to us. I guess so then along the same line of questions, so folks who maybe have been working here for years and years on a visa instead of a green card, they would now be eligible. Is that a correct interpretation?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes, and those that are on long-term visas have been eligible for our rental housing as under current APCHA regs because they have been here legally under the visa.
There's lots of visas which let you work in the United States, but they have to be renewed every couple years. There's the trader investors, certain J1s, other investment visas, and even those people have not been eligible to buy in the program because that's not the same as legal permanent residence, because it has to be renewed at an embassy or consulate every couple years.
And now they would.
Yes.
Are there other regulations that will interact with this that de facto will exclude people?
No.
We don't. No. I was about to say we
Do
don't
need to
think
make
so. but no.
Other
No.
kind of coordinating changes to how people qualify
This
that
is-
both
No, it was just the ID
ensures
section.
that they're eligible and they are working what we require, but that we're getting everything we need to know that.
This is a very clean change. It'll, affect me because I won't have people asking me visa questions anymore, which is a shame. I've enjoyed that, but
I sent them your way.
it's essentially
I
us
can jump
getting
in
out
and
of the
say
immigration analysis business, which we don't really have any business being in anyway.
Tom? Tom, did you have something?
Yeah, just to say, with the state override, there's nothing else that APCHA needs to be concerned about. We can run this our own resources and based on our own rules without having to go through anybody else.
Okay.
Okay. It sounds like I'm going to bring that one back for first reading. So,
Be careful.
let's move forward. Now, these are in order of the pages in the APCHA regulations, not necessarily in order of what might be quick or slow or, so this is a meaty one. This is an overhaul of the, what qualifies as work in Pitkin County. This staff has been working on for a while, probably 6 to 9 months, trying to really flush out what works in practice, what we're seeing in applications that are coming in. We have spent a period of time looking at, okay, if we apply these new rules, what happens? Who does it affect? So we've really tried to think through this. We will have to add in some definitions if this goes forward, such as what is summer and what is winter in the definition, or kind of how this relates to the general requirement of 1,500. But we do think that this is a really good step forward. I think it makes things a little bit clearer to the applicant. So I will walk through this a little bit. So we're saying that work full-time is 1,500 hours per calendar year, which it has been, and that they can document full-time summer and winter employment if they're not in a year-round position. So this means that someone can't bank 1,500 hours during the months of November to April, for example. This is saying that someone really needs to be in the community year-round, doing something, both in summer and winter.
So it's really building off what we've all said, which is full-time employment.
Understanding that to get to 1,500 hours, you have to work roughly 30 hours a week if you were to work 52 weeks a year. So technically, you could work part-time over 52 weeks if you're year-round. So the first step is employer located in Pitkin County, 75% of
Sorry,
income.
can I clarify that? I'm sorry. So you can't work 60 hours a week for 6 months.
That's the proposed change.
You can, but,
Okay.
I mean, you could.
but you still have to work during the
Well, a
summer.
lot of people do. Yeah.
Like, how's that
I think we need
less
to clean
valuable
that
than
up
part-time
a
year
little
round?
bit then.
Days a week through season.
This is a discussion point. This is why, I mean,
Well, I just want to know why that's.
I think
got people
APCHA
that-
staff has always looked at it as full-time employment means almost year-round employment, and then you have the 1,500 hours, which gives you a little bit of wiggle room because of the seasonality of the employment here. It isn't, we have not been accepting people working just in one half of the year as counting as full-time employment, and we're trying to clarify that, you know.
You
and
got restaurants, the Hotel Jerome closes for a couple of months.
Yeah.
You got restaurants that close.
We haven't-
shoulder seasons for a month or two.
which is why we have,
which
Now
is
you've got 8 months a year that they're actually working.
Which is why we tried not to put a month amount in, because we were starting to talk about, do we say you have to work 8 months a year? And then we were saying, okay, your lift operators, your ski and bike instructors, your Hotel Jerome employees that have those shoulder seasons. So your teachers don't work 2 months of the year. I mean, they work, but.
No, they don't.
So we started to try to figure it out, and so that's why we came to summer and winter, saying that you should work year-round. But you're right, someone could work 1,500 hours in 4 or 5 months if they pulled 80-hour weeks and spend the rest of the year hiking and biking
And like taking care of their kids, like they might be a spouse of someone who works year round, you know, but they're doing their ski, they're an instructor and they're the extra bartender because, you know, they have the patio open or blah, blah, you know. So the months of the year in which you work, to me, doesn't matter as much as the hours in the year personally.
No, I think it's the hours more than it is
But you see so much more than I do, I guess, too. I
We're
want to
bringing up the
know,
anomaly,
are
I'm
people?
Yeah, I'm not
You
sure the
know-
anomaly is the best way to make the regulation. Yeah.
It depends. I mean,
Yeah.
to be honest though, it's, yes, we see it more, but if the board is okay accepting an applicant that works November to April and that's it, and doesn't have another role in Pitkin County, then that's fine. They have to be in their unit 9 months a year, or they're out of qualification, so that means
hard to verify that.
we are trying to make sure that they're not taking those 5-6 months and going to travel East Asia or, you know, Europe or wherever. They're actually here in Pitkin County. It does make it a little bit harder for us from a verification standpoint. But it is the board's choice as to whether it's 1,500 hours between November and April or 1,500 hours spread out over the course of the year. That's basically what the decision is.
Because, Bethany, we've always,
As the regulation is currently written, it's the hours no matter how they're distributed. So this would be adding a new requirement.
It just feels a little dicey to say we'd rather have someone part-time year-round. They're contributing more and they deserve more than someone who is taking those seasonal jobs and absolutely crushing themselves. But like, actually, we don't need to house you as much. So to me, it feels a little, we're creeping in on that,
I'd
which
be
worker is more
concerned with
valuable.
that 5 or 6 months a year that they're renting their place out.
Yeah,
Exactly.
no, I mean,
Right.
that's, yeah. Okay.
It's
If they're
more about
one
they're
single
working their asses
person-
off.
I think that's a good. I mean, if somebody's working 60 hours a week for 6 months, I mean, that's.
I mean, it takes into, the way it's written today takes into account, we know we've got a seasonal industries. Some of them aren't as seasonal as they used to be, but they're still seasonal industries. You know, my brother-in-law shuts his restaurant down for a month and a half and.
But it's
everybody
still open
scatters.
during the winter and it's still open during the summer.
Yeah, no, but that's
Yeah.
8 months, right? Eight, 9 months, you're right there at that cusp.
Right, right, but for somebody to work just the winter season, never working anything else during the summer, but they get it all in the winter season, that's an issue for me, because, especially because we know that everybody out there needs help. So I guess, and whether it's, and it does allow people to not be in their unit because they're not here physically working.
me,
We have
it'd
some
be-
people who take summer jobs out of state.
Well, so just devil's advocate, as it's written, I mean, what would stop somebody from working all winter long and then going out and applying anywhere and getting a job for 2 weeks, having a W-2 and showing, yep, here's my summer employment, here's my winter employment.
I mean, that would be
Nothing.
the bare minimum, but yeah,
Right.
I mean, it would make them do something.
And you are seeing compliance issues with people leaving for the summer, you said?
We definitely have, yes, sometimes.
And renting out? Or no,
Well-
that's not, hopefully.
Sometimes
gotten
they leave
complaints
for
on that.
3 months and rent out to music school students, so that's
Every
a
year.
positive, but some of them do it every year, so it's, you know, that's definitely a.
We've been focusing on the full-time employment.
Right.
Well, I would be
Well,
more
we get
concerned
1,500
verifying.
hours out of that person every year, it sounds like.
That's what I'd be more, just verifying that they're actually working and not faking hours somehow, some way.
That happens.
Yeah, what is that? I agree with you. You know, somebody saying they're working 7 days, 60 hours a week. How do you verify that?
It can be hard.
It can be hard, and there's a change coming up in one of these where APCHA's proposing adding kind of some clarifying language to an income calculation that is basically what we use as a bare minimum, which is saying 1,500 hours a year times minimum wage equals X. So if you're not documenting at least X, you're not working 1,500 hours. That's not necessarily that might not be accurate if you make $50 an hour, because it's going to be a different amount. It's the most challenging. A W-2 employee, easy. It is most challenging when we deal with self-employed individuals to figure out their hours requirement.
I would set one of those meetings on.
Yeah.
Venmo payments.
Yeah.
What percentage of
We have another.
owners are self-employed?
Oh gosh.
I don't have affidavit data.
We can get that. I don't have that tonight.
That'd be
we
awesome.
We can get that. that is where staff is most challenged, is self-employed. W-2
Easy.
is easy. It's coming from the employer. It's showing an amount. The pay stub shows, hours each week. It's easy to verify. So
Those self-employed hours is a little bit different from the did you work all year hours, right? Like those self-employed people could easily, if they're already cheating, say they did those any times of the year.
Which is why it's much harder. Yeah.
which is why it's much harder.
So I can't wait to look at those regulations. But as far just if this were to come back, the change were to come back in a vote, I would probably want to keep it as is.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, real quick on employer located outside of Pitkin County.
Yeah.
Right, so you've got employer with office space.
Yeah.
Is that 75% of the individual's income or the employer's income?
So that's individual. I can make that clarification. So I'll just jump down. So an employer located outside Pitkin County. So Hotel Jerome, I think, is a perfect example. The W-2s are coming from Atlanta, I think, which is where their corporate office is. So by a W-2, it shows not working in Pitkin County, but we know they're working in Pitkin County because they're actually working for the Hotel Jerome. The Hotel Jerome just doesn't process their own W-2s in town. So that is where that has office space owned or leased. We're considering that Hotel Jerome or the airport. Those W-2s come out of, I forget where. Where is that?
St. George.
Thank you. Utah. So that is 75% of an individual's income must be earned in Pitkin County. The office space, if an employer does not have office space owned or leased in Pitkin County, that's the 90% of goods and services must be provided to Pitkin County. So 90% of the individual's goods and services must be provided. That would be, your example there is your wine salesman or your liquor distributor where they don't have any space. They have their car. They're driving up and down the valley selling throughout. So the change in this is really that it's 95%. So everything is
90.
90%.
Sorry, 90. I apologize. Combined 75 and 90. Everything in this employer located outside of Pitkin County, besides the addition of those words, is the same except for 90% of goods and services. We are doing a carve out for if they don't have owned or leased commercial space in Pitkin County. Again, this is a change. You all could say, nope, there's no reason to make it 90. It can stay at 75%. There's no difference between
Well, to
office
me,
space.
That gets pretty hard. I mean, for your example, right? That guy might have a customer list down in Basalt and Willits, right? You're in Eagle County now. So you're selling to 3 restaurants down there, you're selling to 10 up here.
Or you're selling to 3 up here, making a heck of a lot
Right,
more money.
90% more
No, I'm
money's
just
coming.
saying, but you don't know that for sure.
Yeah.
90%'s a
Yeah.
big threshold,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Is he adding any less to the value of the property when you set that threshold higher, or value of the program? I don't think so. I mean, he's still a rep here. He's still taking care of customers in Aspen. He's still taking customers, really, and it's kind of the exclusionary zone, right? It's our valley. On somebody like that.
It's not the exclusionary zone. They can't,
No, that's what I'm
Rifle is not
saying, but he's
included
still
in it.
working in the exclusionary zone,
Yeah.
right?
But the Rifle's not included in Pitkin County. They don't pay Pitkin County taxes. Garfield County
No,
doesn't.
I didn't say that,
There's a
but
lot
I'm
of them.
saying that, if he's got clients in Willits, he's got clients in where, Carbondale and some of those places too. Like, those are places we all go and frequent. Everybody in the valley goes up and down the valley. And, you got a few clients and they skew the numbers 1 year or 2 years or whatever it is. Is he serving Aspen any less? Or I shouldn't say he, they.
Yeah.
Can you give more example? You're dealing with this every day, with self-employed, the ones that get tricky. Is it the
Sure.
wine salesman? Is it?
Construction workers.
Yeah, with like a
Construction
contractor.
Contractor.
An
Property
office is cheaper
managers.
anywhere but Pitkin County, right? But they're
They've all
doing
moved,
they're building all their
from the
houses in
Airport Business
Aspen.
Center right outside of Pitkin County.
Yeah,
And yet
including
they're-
Pitkin County
yet they work
offices.
on homes up here. But now what happens when that job's done and they're in our housing and now they're working down valley? That's a concern because the business itself is outside of Pitkin County and the business itself is not paying Pitkin County taxes. But we allow that because there are an awful lot of people, a lot of them that do work up here, and we have allowed that.
And the next job might be back here, right? Like the next person might need a plumber, someone to live somewhere close enough to serve them. Can just
Kelly has her hand raised too. Sorry.
as I'm reading the red line, because you pointed out that actually this is all what was in there already, except for the 90, but it's all in red. How am I supposed to interpret what is new and what is?
So what you're looking at, really, this is all rewritten.
Got it.
So this
Okay.
is all, I mean, so my point of it's in there is the intent is in there. So it's written in the regs currently in a different manner, but it's 75% of income must be done in Pitkin County is currently in our APCHA regulations. So we crossed out the entire last section and tried to rewrite it in a way that provided a little bit more clarity. I think we would stick with this, even, making changes such as striking if 90% wasn't chosen, striking that, those sorts of things, trying to make it clearer, because this is something we deal with on a daily basis. Individuals not understanding that what they do has no direct correlation to Pitkin County, and we get fought on it all the time. They might sell a couple $100s worth of goods in Pitkin County, but everything else is outside of Pitkin County, but they feel they need to qualify for our housing. And so it's really just trying to make it as clear as possible so that when we're writing those denial letters, I hate to say it that way, we are like, look, it's clear as can be in these regs, because that's what we're struggling with these days.
And the 31 that have been processed as audits, there was no issues with self-employment?
I don't think so.
But there were no issues. I'm trying to think how many of them were self-employed at this point. I can, off the top of my head, maybe think of 3 for sure. And they were able to provide, and they had the K-1, and it was all, but they were also long-term, have been doing this for a long time. But their records were tight, and they followed all the verification formats.
This one, like the employment thing and the 75% of income, the only thing you're verifying there is that they're working in Pitkin County and providing services, right? Somebody that's this is qualifying to get into a unit, right? To rent or to buy.
And our biggest issue with self-employed, to be honest, is there are the businesses that Jackie just mentioned that have all their records in the K-1s and keep wonderful invoicing and profit and loss statements and have been doing it for years. And then we have the folks that show up with a notebook and a shoebox, and there's no invoicing and there's no client list, and it's just sort of you figure it out, I work. That's where we really struggle to be like, do you actually work? Like, where is this backup? And staff spends an inordinate amount of time on those individuals trying to decipher handwritten statements.
I would have expected people to have their books better in order, trying to apply or qualify.
One would think
that.
One would
Learned something today. Okay.
Real quick, I want to go to Kelly. She's had her hand up for quite a bit here.
Sorry, Kelly.
No worries. You guys are talking right where I'm thinking. I guess a couple things I'd like to clarify. So if someone works 2,200 hours and some of that is outside of Pitkin County, does that start to mean that their math required for in Pitkin County needs to skew upward?
So, so we look at if they make, let's say, $50,000 in Denver and $100,000 in Pitkin County, we look at the math and say, okay, 75% of your income earned was not in Pitkin County. We see that too when some people show up with investment income. We add that in. Investment income is not earned in Pitkin County, so that skews their 75% earned. That income, that 75% income is currently in the regulations, and we think it should stay to make sure that they are working the majority of their time in Pitkin County, if nothing else.
Right. I'm just saying, okay, I may need to think through that a little bit more. Because, you know, if they make more money doing like a little side job, which takes fewer hours, that disqualifies them for their W-2 employment in Pitkin County where they work 2,080 hours, which is full-time. That's just an interesting thing to think
That's exactly
through.
what I was thinking about
But to
too.
me,
And
they
then-
would still qualify. They're working 2,000
wondering-
hours full-time in here.
Where you refer to the 90%, I'm a little unclear if is it 90% of income derived from goods and services?
Yes,
Okay, then we should write that.
I can make that clarification.
Okay, thank you. That's all for now.
One of the things that we struggle with every single day is everybody wants to live in Aspen. They will make up a job to come and live here. Who does the board really want us to house? We cannot house everybody. We go into restaurants that are only open during part of the time because they don't have enough people. How do we get more people in? This is an artist. I'm not saying that artists are not necessary, but we just don't have the housing, enough housing to house everybody. I mean, and we see it every single day. You don't see these people coming in saying, I got this job, I can work this job, but I can't find housing. And it's a job that store needs or that restaurant needs or something like that. Because somebody who can work remotely and make a ton of money working remotely and just work a little bit of hours in Pitkin County is getting into our housing.
Well, I mean, that was her point, and that's what I was thinking too. Yeah, you might be working $15 an hour job, 2,000 hours a year, but you know, for whatever reason, you.
But that to me
you
would,
have
would still qualify that
Well,
person
and
if
that was
that
the
person
point
is
I
working.
wanted you to make with her was.
Kelly, go ahead.
Is that
No, John, what?
You've
Yeah,
got your
I
hand.
think I'm a little more confused. But I'd like John to sort of walk us through that a little bit more. And then a separate question maybe we can answer next is, how do we treat someone who perhaps is working for like a national organization and they set up like a home-based office? So they're, you know, does it look like they have a lease that's in Pitkin County, but they're not actually, but you know, truly they're working for a national organization? Like, how does that get sorted out?
So, if it's work for Pitkin County services, they might qualify, but most of the time they don't qualify. So it would actually have to be work that provides Pitkin County goods and services. So
It's at 75% of the individual working in that quote-unquote office has to be earned in Pitkin County.
So it can't be that they're only working with clients in New York City or Florida or Texas. They have to be working with clients in Pitkin County or providing goods to Pitkin County. So we've seen this before with photographers often, where they work for a national publication, but they have been hired to take pictures in Aspen. And so we count that work because it's specific to Pitkin County and Aspen. But if they're a photographer that travels the world that just wants to live in Aspen, but there's no reason that they are here, then that doesn't count. So
No, it was more like you hedged on. I'm thinking a liquor rep, Pegler, Cisco rep, whatever else, where they might have a home office or they're working out of the trunk of their car, walking downtown Main Street, selling to each one of their clients along the way, and they're earning. That's why I say 90 seems a little bit high when the threshold's already 75. But they're selling food and beer and wine to restaurants that are then selling that. But they may have clients down valley or somewhere else that they, you know, when you total up all their receipts, to hit 90% means you're not going to have very many clients down valley.
yeah.
I guess I just wonder what the additional added benefit there is of the place where they go to work, like the office space lease, like how that helps you guys, you know, or is it just cleaner to have like a threshold of goods and services? I don't know. You tell me.
I think it was a little bit of staff seeing a significant number of folks that don't have any sort of leased commercial space and working from home and really trying to figure out if they worked here and what they were doing.
Selling everything over the internet and where you could do anywhere and, yeah.
Yes.
Allison.
What we're talking about, I believe, is when the employer doesn't have a home base in Pitkin County. I'm curious about the inverse in situations where the business is based here, but a lot of the work is done in other places and states, legal, accounting, architecture. And so I'm just trying to make sure I understand what.
Right now, they're a W-2 employee. They go to work every day in their office space, and they might be doing mortgages or architectural designs across the country, yet they show up on a daily basis and walk into a physical location. And so they work in Pitkin County and they qualify. So yes, there is a slight,
Yeah, and they pay taxes.
there is a slight, difference in that fact that they are, I don't want to say like getting it easy, but they are walking into a brick building.
I mean, like they might be flying to New York because that's their biggest client. And they're there 3 weeks of the month.
But they have to meet the 75%. That person has to
That's
meet
what I'm
the
wondering.
75% requirement.
Well,
No,
all
because
of their
they're-
income is going to be earned in Pitkin County if they're W-2 for a business that's licensed in Pitkin County. They might not be serving Pitkin County.
Correct. They might not be. And it's something that we've always looked at. And there's, I'm going to be honest, staff would probably, I don't know, probably go crazy if we tried to figure out where their client list was.
Don't make it harder for us.
Yeah. I mean, we're
So
trying.
that's the difference, the employer versus the clients.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting if we have 13,800 jobs in Pitkin County. Now we're talking about, well, what is that work actually contributing to the community? Are those jobs based here but not contributing to the community? But if they're collecting income here, they're being taxed and they're a member of the community. I know, Ward, we don't want to say the P word, but I think what Cindy said is a good point, and I'd really love to know at some point how many artists we have in housing versus restaurant workers, so we know who we're housing and who we're not.
Those have to be synonymous people.
What do you mean?
I really believe a lot of our restaurant workers are artists and vice versa.
Yeah,
Well,
they-
if they're-
they could be,
You know,
both,
But if they're
or will become
claiming,
one or the other.
if they're claiming 1,500 hours as an artist, or
You can have trust fund artists that create all sorts of receipts and do artwork in their garage and try to say they work 1,500 hours.
They really want to live in a
Sorry, that was a
grody
direct
carpet
reference to
Burlingame house.
somebody
Like,
else.
right?
Again.
So
Is that a flashback?
Maybe,
In-
maybe.
in an effort to keep us moving, just being cognizant of time, what I think I have heard, if Carson's okay with me summarizing,
Please.
is that the 90% might be too high. So we're going to go back and combine everything to 75%, make the clarification income derived that Kelly requested, and clean things up, as well as remove the full-time summer and winter employment in a year-round position. We're going to make some changes to that to move us forward, to bring it back for first reading and see where we get. I think no matter what, we're making a step forward because it's a lot cleaner. What I do know is we could debate this to death and we might not get anywhere. I think there's some great points of, who we're housing and those sort of great topics that we can discuss, or you all can discuss as a board at a later
Bethany?
date. Yes, Tom.
John raised the issue of the OEZ versus Pitkin County. I don't know if
I
that
think
has any.
Well, I was just bringing that up because if you're, we don't let people own secondary property in the OEZ, but if they're
And we don't
serving
let
up
them
and
work
down the
there.
valley, right? If they're serving up and down the valley, and I get this is a Pitkin County Aspen program, but they're still serving everybody.
I think
It's a
dropping
community.
dropping it to 75.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, it's
Great.
fair.
Okay. Everything else below that is already in the regs. I just rewrote it in here. So we can move to the next slide, please.
Well, I just thought self-employed was one of our biggest issues, right?
Oh, sorry. Okay. But self-employed matches basically
Okay,
employer outside of Pitkin County.
so we could get rid of
I can.
self-employed?
No, you'll still have it.
I'll still
'Cause
have it.
you,
We'll
you would be, oh,
It'll
Match
just
the-
match.
I would be
self-employed
okay
is
if
actually
we, if
technically,
self-employed person couldn't qualify.
well, that's technically an employer located in Pitkin County, like you're your own employer, right?
The clarification is the W-2 portion. So the second one, they're still a W-2 employee,
Right.
but they don't have, so
Office
someone
space.
working for the city of Aspen, they're both based here and their employer's based here. Someone
what do you
working for the
do with,
drone, they're based here, but their employer's based outside of Pitkin County.
What do you do if they're a contract worker?
1099,
Schedule
it
C.
says.
1099.
So if you're getting a 1099, how do they prove up that they've earned 75% of that income in Pitkin County, and then
Invoices.
Invoicing.
so
And
you get
client
invoices?
list.
Okay.
Yeah, so the invoicing and client list, even if you don't lease a commercial space, you're working from your home, but you have invoices and client lists that verify that you're working, that's fine.
That would, I mean, to me, that like, we're just proving that out. I mean, I can print a client list and invoice, and I mean, right, you can make that up.
So what we try to match is we try to match invoices with payment received, with taxes
Okay.
and that. So it's not
Well,
just
it's
like,
almost-
It's gonna be harder.
it's
to just-
it's harder.
right,
We
okay.
I mean we take all those. If you're just giving us I made $6,000 and it's like, okay, but where? Like
Right,
who
okay.
paid that? Then it's diving down into those invoicing and a lot of people don't invoice their clients or their which is fascinating.
Well, I was thinking like a project soup, right? They might be a 1099 to a general contractor. So they're gonna have, hey, I was on this job site from X to X, and I billed the contractor Y, and they're gonna know, and the job site was located up the street.
All right.
And
so
if you're
but
trying
then
to
they
do
got a
it-
job down in Basalt that they're working on, and here's how many hours I was down there.
Sorry, to interrupt. If you're trying to do that to get a house, you've done that, you have at least 4 years of that data. I mean, that's, you're a local, it shows, right? Like, you're not making it up one time for like,
Right.
oh, I'm gonna just go get this house. And then you also have to be picked, which is another element. I guess I was just wondering how redundant the self-employed part is just from the other two.
We'll combine it now at this point.
And okay, because I think the one thing is some deed restrictions do allow you to use your APCHA unit as a business address,
Most
and some don't. Most do.
It depends on City of Aspen and Pitkin County home
occupancy.
occupancy requirements.
And
So
how many people you're employing.
Yeah, usually they defer to the zoning.
yeah.
Okay. My guess is your biggest violators, tricksters, are using their own house as their own fake business and just trying to stay here in their own, like, not that they have an address somewhere in town,
Yeah.
but are faking that they actually do their
Yeah.
psychic services or whatever, you know.
They're fun to deal with.
And then we just added in the final bullet point, remote workers and workers who work less than 1,500 hours a year in Pitkin County do not qualify.
And I do like how you have this set up. Basically, every person can go through and be like, bullet point, yes, no, bullet point, yes, no, but like,
What's the intention?
what's my
Yeah.
answer to this, you
So
know?
we'll clean it up and combine, but we'll bring it back.
Great.
Are all people that are currently in ownership housing grandfathered in to the old set of rules?
No, so if the deed restriction states something along the lines of as amended from time to time in regards to the regulations, the new regulations take effect. That being said, APCHA really tries to work with people, so if we were to find a compliance case where it was they might have qualified under the old regs, but they don't qualify under the new regs, we want to work with them. I mean, we're not going to give them 5 years, but let's give you a couple months to try to find a different job. To get you into compliance, because at the end of the day, getting someone into compliance is what we want.
Yeah, that's great.
Allison's smiling, so what do you have?
That is what we want.
Yeah.
No, I love that.
Yes, next page.
It's
Okay,
great, baby.
we are adding in a new section on page 15. We would like to at least that says there's a continued obligation to keep APCHA informed. So please let us know,
Contact information.
contact information. That's the biggest one. Often we get their work email address, and then when we go to send the affidavit, they no longer work there, and so they don't get the affidavit. So it's just sort of the idea that, hey, can you let us know if you have a change in household size, if the unfortunate situation happens and you might get divorced and one of your spouses is taken off the deed, or even more unfortunate, a spouse passes and they're taken off the deed. Just to kind of, help us know. We also really like to work with people. So if you do lose your job and you're looking for a new one, hey, let us know. And we're happy to say, okay, we're not going to do compliance on you because you've lost your job, as long as you're actively looking to find a new one. So again, it's just.
Hey, these updates, does Home Trek allow you to do it yourself?
Yes.
So do we send emails out, hey, update this one, add to the regulations, and then you can send an email that says, hey, from time, you're.
Yeah, we can send news flashes.
And then you
out
can
or-
send an email out saying, hey, update your contact information, and here's how you do it, here's the link.
What's the implication of this being in regulations? Like if your person has died, you change your job and your email, and it says in the regulations you're really supposed to, okay, you can't get in trouble just because you didn't comply with Section 3.
Yeah, no, it's more you keep us informed, we'll keep you informed.
Regulations are just where everybody goes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where the information is. We're trying to make it clearer for the clients what they need to do, their responsibilities.
I think you'd have a real hard time enforcing it, like, yeah, you didn't update us,
Yeah.
you're out.
Yeah, I would
We
not.
haven't added
But-
that to the fine schedule yet.
I wouldn't, Jackie, I think would agree with me in that I would never, start a compliance case off of this. I mean, this is a, let's be nice to each other.
And the language in this was already in the regulations in various spots. We felt it was important to pull it together in one place, just to remind everybody, you need to keep things updated, which would include changes of jobs and those sorts of things as well, but.
Sounds good to me. Let's move on.
Ready?
Yeah. Verification documents. Okay. I think some of this got a little skewed when it got crossed over onto PowerPoint. But what I will say is it's a little bit of what we talked about in the beginning, the first slide, which was the receiving of a public benefit. So basically, we don't need a valid document that says you're here legally anymore. A Colorado driver's license is still required to purchase. Because if you're in the state of Colorado for more than 30 days, you need a Colorado driver's license.
Or an ID.
Or an ID of some sort. That's Colorado state law, not APCHA law. And so in order to purchase, you do need a Colorado ID or driver's license.
So the situation where someone doesn't have that is just that they ignored that and have been living here for a long time and never switched from Oklahoma to Colorado.
And most people we run into are like that.
And
we just,
again, the bank would still give them the loan. We just won't give them the chance to bid.
Correct. You can just walk down, or you can drive down to the DMV or in Glenwood and get an appointment and get yourself a Colorado driver's license or an ID card and come on back. But we do not require that for rental.
In our packet, page 16, at the bottom of that page, I think it's the most meaningful. The applicant has the burden to credibly demonstrate to APCHA.
Yes.
Yeah, that the applicant meets all qualification requirements for workforce housing contained in these regulations and any applicable deed restriction.
And thank you for spotting that, Ward, because we have had lawyers argue to us that we have to prove that they don't qualify, which is just craziness. So, we've always thought that was implicit, but we wanted to make it very, very clear.
How do you show someone what's not there?
It's very fun. So this will get cleaned up, but again, this is just playing off of the addition of the part we saw in number 1, public benefit slide. I'm ready to go to the next if the board is.
Let's move on.
Let's move on. We're
Just
cruising.
so,
Oh.
yes, personal identification documents, that, this does comply with the new Colorado
Yeah.
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 that says that we can't ask for ID? What is it?
So it doesn't matter if they're here legally. So right
But we still
now,
want an
That,
ID.
that's
So right-
proving identity,
yeah.
not
Citizenship.
Not
And so
immigration status.
right now, the Colorado driver's license that have the big black bar on them, which is basically, hey, we're going to give you an ID, but you're not here legally. We would have to tell those folks you don't qualify. Now, if someone shows up with that ID or driver's license with a big black bar on it, they qualify.
Right.
because they've proven identity.
Identity.
We know who they are.
And they're paying taxes, and they're qualifying for all of the other
Yeah.
requirements, yeah.
Correct.
Next slide is okay, it's brand new in the APCHA regs. However, I will say that staff uses this calculation just to get us to a certain point, which is we take minimum wage every year and we times it by 1,500 hours and we say, okay, right now I think it's just under 20,000, maybe a little over 20,000.
State minimum wage?
State minimum wage. We say, okay, someone needs to show us $20,000 on a tax return to say that they're working 1,500 hours.
Should you qualify that as Colorado state minimum wage?
I can do that. We know that that is not a perfect number. We use this when we are looking at someone that is basically self-employed. A W-2 employee, we're going to see it, but it's those self-employed folks that are showing on their tax returns maybe $2,000 or maybe $1,500, and after we add back in, we're still only at $12,000. That is where we really use this, and so we want this memorialized in the regs so that it is a little clearer.
And that's a pretty low bar, even that. I mean,
Well, this is the people I'd be far more worried about
Yes.
actually working
Right.
1,500 hours.
100%, and for us as well. Tom, I know you had some thoughts. You and I were trading an email on them today. So
No, the concept that Bethany has just explained is exactly right. I think we need to reword this, especially the first sentence. Basically, say APCHA. In effect, APCHA shall determine. In determining whether hours are number of hours are satisfied, APCHA will apply the minimum wage in the absence of other accurate information. It's just a wording thing, but we don't need to digress onto that now. But
and that,
concept,
Well, so
now that Bethany's explained it, I get it.
and so the second piece, the APCHA's adjusted income, that's always been in our APCHA regs. It's been in a different section, and so it's combined in, and it's very helpful to show how we arrive at their income when we start adding back things in that they have deducted out of their tax returns to usually this throws them in a completely different category than what their tax return
Well, so real quick, let's go to, I mean, should it say something, Tom, about based upon income available? You know, if you've got somebody that's invoicing at $50 an hour for 100 hours or something, and then we're gonna take,
Yeah.
what, $15 an hour times X to get to, like, you know, they're invoicing at 50.
No, that's
That
not
should be
it.
their
What's-
basis.
what-
No.
Well, I mean, if someone could document that they're actually
No, but
getting
I'm
that
saying
much.
they're understating then, and they're working a third of the time that they
Yeah.
potentially should be, is all I'm
I
saying.
think we'd be looking at invoices and
Yeah,
the
right.
other
So
aspects.
the documentation is crucial, but what we see all the time is that there is no connection between wage, what they tell us that they're making and the hours they work. They don't give us documentation that connects the two. So they'll give us a minimum, they'll tell us how much they make, and then they'll make up a number on the hours, or vice versa. So what Bethany is talking about is a situation where if the documentation isn't sufficient for APCHA to verify number of hours worked based on either direct evidence of those hours or hour per work amount, charge per hour for work, we would use the minimum wage to make the computation.
And you would be honestly shocked at how many tax returns we see where the individual claims that they have made somewhere between $5,000 and $12,000 over the course of the year, but are working 1,500 hours a year.
Or 80 hours a week.
Or 80 hours a week.
Exactly.
And so
Honestly.
this is really addressing, I don't want to make regulation changes that are reactive, but this is really, this clarification is very helpful for staff when having to deny someone for not working 1,500 hours to be able to point to this and say, you are showing $12,000 or $8,000 or, gosh, I saw $300 the other day as income. That is not 1,500 hours a year, or you maybe need to, well, it's not my
You don't
position.
know how many
I'll
people
stop.
we've turned down for loans that, a couple $100,000 in the bank, and they work, they show they make $10,000 a year, but they want to borrow $300. That math doesn't work either.
Exactly.
That dog won't hurt.
2 points on this addition. One is for a self-employed individual who provides goods in town, their income is going to be based on the price of those goods. They might actually be paying themselves essentially less than the minimum wage, and I'm sure they are saying, it took me 600 hours to make this sweater. I gave it over to the Emporium. This is my dream life. And it sold for $50. I actually did spend 600 hours in my job, though. So that's one reason this is complicated for me. And I had a second. Is the other place you see this service workers, tip-based workers who actually can probably show on taxes significantly less earnings than they put in the bank that year because all the cash tips that they might receive, and they're just trying not to show you the tips part. And if so, I would, I guess, make sure we're using the minimum wage for service and tip-based and not hourly for that reason. Though, I'm stating
still
that I
gonna get a
think they're...
W-2.
They get a W-2.
They still get a W-2 for the hours worked at minimum wage, their minimum wage.
We have...
So I'm just hoping that that the calculation is at that, the 1,500 hours times.
We have seen one server who showed us a tax return for, I don't remember the amount, but maybe $9,000, and we asked a clarifying question, and they said, oh yeah, I received about $8,000 in tips, and we said, great, correct your taxes and come back to see us, and we are happy to qualify you and put you in our program, but we need to see accurate taxes. So we've seen it once then, and they went and corrected their taxes, I believe, and then came back to us.
I would take a house over some taxes.
So we've seen it that way, yes. We've definitely, and Kelly, you have your hand raised, but I was just going to say we have seen those folks that tell us that it takes 500 hours to make one thing, and if they can really document that, sure. If they are making a sweater, using your example.
I love my example, yeah.
500 hours is a bit of a stretch for us, but we certainly look at reasoning, and we certainly look at the upstart of a business. You're going to have some hours that aren't getting income, such as marketing or creating materials where you're not going to see a direct correlation, but we do think that this is a good place.
My proposal or request would be that this language goes under that 1,500 hour, that first section that we spent so much time on, of what qualifies you. And we use this paragraph, hey, by the way, your income must at least make these 2 things that are required. Where you're working, where you're earning the majority of your earnings, and that you're working enough. And since that's in that section, maybe just have this explain, we're going to use this calculation. So maybe you use it first.
And what I will say, not to cut you off, is that we know that the APCHA regs are a little bit disjointed right now, and we also want to go through and organize them. The intention was to do that in the new year, is to really look and say, this should go here, this should go here, this needs to be here, and then bring you back a reorganized document, not necessarily with any changes
Right.
to it. So we understand that. So if it stays under income calculation right now, it's only because that's where it somewhat makes sense from a flow perspective under current. But we do know that there needs to be some changes from a structural standpoint, for lack of a better word. We've been making changes to this. I mean, if you look back at the original, they were like 12 pages in the 80s. Now we're at 70 something.
All right, we got 35
Kelly?
minutes left.
Hey, I've got
Callie, go.
6:15 dinner. So I'm gonna sit here.
On
for
an
a little
APCHA
bit.
night?
Yeah.
Sorry, I guess I'm wondering, is this most helpful for rental qualifications? Do most of the ownership folks go through the mortgage application process where you would have the robust verification process happening?
They wouldn't go through the mortgage process until they won. So we see this on both sides. Certainly, we see it more on a day-to-day basis on someone qualifying for a rental unit. That being said, we do see it from an ownership when we do cross-reference mortgage statements versus what they've provided to us when and if they've won. But no, this is just as important on an ownership side.
Okay. And are most of the ownerships going through the mortgage process?
We have one right now that's private financing, but everything else currently is
Okay.
through a mortgage or through a bank lender. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ready to move on?
I just had Andrew jump you.
Yeah, let's go ahead. Keep going.
Okay, so the next is employer designated units. This is a change. This is a provision allowing employers who own a unit to put an individual of their choice, that's one of their employees, in that unit, even if they don't meet that category. So what we are seeing right now is a bunch of employers who have these units that might be category 1 or 2 that worked really well in 1980 when they bought them and the deed restriction got slapped on and they work great. But now all their employees are category 3. And so they can't use these units for their own categories because that individual is of a higher category. So staff is proposing that employer designated units in which the employer is putting their own employee in that unit, they can choose the employee, but they need to know that if it's a category 1 or 2, if it's a unit, that the rent that's allowed to be charged is category 2, for example, if that's what that unit is. And that way that employer is not always picking their highest earner to go in that unit. So we're giving them the flexibility to say, okay, you know your workforce best and who needs that housing, and allowing them to pick who goes in, but understanding that even if they pick their highest earner, they're not making category 4 or category 5 or RO rent. They're still at that 1 or 2, whatever that unit is designated
like
as.
Some of those categories, 1 or 2, that's $25 an hour, right? That's, I mean, they may have employees that don't even qualify today because
Correct.
Exactly.
They've got raises
Correct.
along the way.
And that's what we've been seeing a lot of.
And they're saying we would no longer be able to raise the rent on those people.
Well, they're
Or like
just saying
people
not
right
raise the
now.
rent.
They
but
can't- they can't put their employees in it.
because
Right,
they
right
make too
now.
much money.
Yeah. Or they're sitting empty because they can't find anyone to go into a category 1. And so we're basically saying, okay, we think that the best use of these units is to fill them with the employee of that employer, but to not allow that employer to charge a
the rent.
higher rental rate.
Just,
Um,
yeah.
Category of,
Yeah.
I think that's fair. And that benefits the employee. Employee or, whatever, it's probably minimal gain one way or the other to them.
Well, they
But
get-
they get at least to an employee.
Yeah.
And this is allowed. This also is allowed in the units that are attached to like lodges, that they have the ability, they're almost all category 2 units, but they have the ability to put in a housekeeper, or they have ability to put in a manager, whomever they want, because they needed somebody on site. So it's not like we're setting a new precedent, but we're allowing these employer-owned units to be used for their own employees, which is the intent of what that program was.
Tom?
Well, I guess just thoughts, not anything specific in terms of a solution, but this kind of puts first it gives the tenant a major break over the tenant who's now Category 3 and used to be Category 1 now gets a major benefit compared to other Category 3 tenants by having to pay the lower rent. But also, could this work against the employee by the employer saying, well, if I have to put a Category 1, if I can only charge Category 1 rents, why should I be paying you this big salary?
Well, then they go to work for somebody else.
Yeah, they would go to work for somebody else, and so they're losing employees this way as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Kelly, other hand up.
And then maybe the employer would let that guy go and start with somebody who doesn't have to pay as much since he's only charging the lower rent. I don't know.
They usually can't get the employee. They
Should
usually
we
end up
put
having
you
an
can't
empty
fire your
position.
employees in here?
Yeah.
Kelly?
We can't control that.
I'm kidding. I was being facetious.
Well, I guess I'm just wondering too that a lot of times these category assignments are related to complicated land use decisions that carry forward from the past, and that concessions were made in those land use decisions to arrive at a category designation. You know, nothing, I mean, I don't know if employers have thought about going back to those jurisdictions. I feel like we've had a few in Pitkin County where people have come back and said, we need to amend this approval to change the category designation to better work for us. And then they update the subsidy accordingly. So if they wanted, generally a lower subsidy meant that they
Higher category.
were kind of out of pocket less, a higher subsidy in the category designation. So if someone wanted to go from a 1 to a 3, like Pitkin County would say, okay, great, you need to pay the difference in the housing mitigation fee in order to do that. But we've
doesn't this
approved some of
change that?
those
Doesn't this
changes
take
to
this
sort
off
of
the table,
react
Kelly?
to these changes. But I'm fine with this because it honors it wouldn't be a problem honoring a land use decision if that's how this employer unit was generated.
It's keeping the rental rate
Let me
the
know
same.
if there's.
I mean, that
Yeah,
takes
well,
that
it's
off the
keeping.
table.
Yeah, it is. It's honoring what the category designation was, and again, those can be carried forward from a long, long time back. But nothing prevents the employer from trying to revisit that decision, and I don't know if many of them know that they can do that.
Well, I think it takes it off the table. Some of the employers weren't even part of that approval process. They were just purchase units, but they were designated a Category 2 or 3 or 1 or whatever it was. And so what we're saying is you can rent it to a Category 3 person, but you can only charge category specific rent, right?
Well,
Isn't this a way of really rewarding valuable employees?
Yeah, this is what I would do with it. Absolutely.
I have a,
Are you talking about this?
well, my question is on employer-owned units. I didn't think an employer could buy a unit.
There's a few
There's a few,
projects.
yeah.
There are
in
some
town.
Yeah.
unusual situations.
There's
in
one, the
which
new
that
one went right
has
down the
happened.
street. I don't remember the address, but they sold out like hotcakes.
The one's next to City Hall, or between City Hall and community banks.
Yeah, my own situation over the years, involvement in churches where you have a minister that might come into town that doesn't qualify because they haven't the residency, but the church has been around for 100 years.
St. Mary's Church has an employer-owned unit, so the Catholic Diocese in Denver owns the unit for St. Mary's.
But let's say the Aspen Chapel can't buy a unit.
They could buy a unit that is employer designated that is up for sale. Those don't happen often.
Yeah.
Were employers who own these units looking to put other members of the workforce that earn less in, or were they kind of being like, well, I should just hold it, it's mine, what if I have an employee coming? Like, the one thing I worry about is that I think our lower category rentals are more rare anyway, and this is almost getting rid of them, because now you can throw cat 3s, cat 4s, so this is very interesting to hear that this is an issue, and I see how that is a solution. I'm glad we get a marinate on it before we discuss it again.
I mean, I would almost, I think if, as this is written, it removes all the categories from all those employer-owned units. I mean, they're effectively all category 5 if you want. I understand the rent
For
that gets
qualifying,
charged
yeah.
for qualifying. I
Yes.
understand the rent that they pay is less. I wonder if maybe some sort of a, 2-year exception or to give, if you've got an employee that is going to be leaving town, if you can't find them housing and you've got a unit, you can put them. I don't know if I'm comfortable with just saying anything goes.
Following up on what Kelly said, you could put something in here that either recommends or requires that the employer, if they want to, that they have an option of asking either the city or the county as appropriate to change the category.
Well, I think what we're expressing is a fear of losing
Keep an employee.
1, 2 units,
I think of
and that would lose
Alpine
them.
Bank probably has 8 or 9 of these units, right? And they're probably low category. They were housing tellers in them when I worked there. And today the teller rate's $25 an hour. That's category 2
Could we do
minimum.
cat -1 the way we do a cat +1 for bidding?
I mean, we struggle to find folks that qualify for category 1 rental units. I mean, just in general, these units sit empty longer than the 45-day period that's allowable based upon the deed restriction because we can't find anyone. So yes.
Well, they're not posted anywhere, so.
Well, no, because it's the employer, and the
Right.
employer wants their own employee in at the.
Right, so they're kind of hoarding it. I mean, I don't know that they have exhausted not being able to fill it with a workforce member. I understand wanting to keep it for themselves, but also if they have been so successful that they're able to pay salaries above their needs at the time that they bought it, maybe they are able to offer it to other members of the community or make the money to sell it.
I have 2 thoughts. One is that they can't keep their employees or find employees because they don't have housing, and yet they're sitting on 8 units that they can't put their own employees in, and yet they had the forethought 20 years ago to buy these units, and yes, they could go back to the county and the city and pay money to change the designation. The other thought is, and it's something I didn't mention, is if an employer wants to take advantage of this, a new deed restriction be put on the unit, and this might capture a few that might be expiring and going away. So it might be a way to put some permanent deed restrictions on a few rental units that might go away at a certain period of time and bring it up to speed a little bit. I mean, I think that would be my thought. We definitely hear from employers all the time on this across the board.
For the next meeting, can we find out how many employer-owned units there are out of the 3,200?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, we can.
So real quick, I'm just playing devil. So what's the punishment if a employer rents to an employee at category, whatever the category designation is, but that employee is making more money? Are you telling them, oh, you gotta sell? You're gonna make them divulge the money they got over and above what they could rent it for, right? That's happened in town before, but you're not gonna force them to sell.
Well, we can't make them sell.
Right, so, I
rental.
mean, what you're doing is basically
Well,
saying,
you
you're
could
just
ultimately.
legalizing
You
it.
could fine
You
them.
could if they don't comply, but I think in the first instance, you tell them to fix it.
Yeah.
But then they're like, hey, I don't have any employees that make
I mean,
category 1.
I think this is a problem that does need to be corrected. I'm just wondering if APCHA is the place to correct it. It feels to me that the city and the county who initially put the deed restrictions in place, I mean, you have a category 1 unit that somebody paid, $100,000 for, and then now all of a sudden, and the one next door is a category 4 that they paid $400,000 for, and they can both now just put whoever they want in the unit. I mean, I do think it needs to be changed, but like I said, I think the city and the county need to be the ones to make these changes.
That makes sense because going forward, anybody that's building to a category, they'd want to build to a category 1, right?
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
Is it all from kind of land use stuff, or did some people buy with federal low-income housing type things where they had to
All
do
land
it?
use.
all
Okay.
land
So it's just getting Alpine Bank, or, I mean, I think we said they own 8. Sorry, I have to stand. The idea of paying, I don't know what the current fee in lieu is, but let's say 800,000 to change the categories. And are they going to change those? And Morg, you would know better than I would what maybe the fee is going to be, but they're probably not. And then the unit's either going to sit empty, or APCHA has to step in through compliance and force an applicant on that employer if the deed restriction allows. And
Or at least force a public posting.
I think this is stuff, I mean, this is the boogeyman thing where I know you've got employers that have units that they can't put their employees in because those people make too much money today.
For sure.
And we're talking
For sure.
entry-level jobs. To be able to put an employee in there is far more important than get your VIG on land use code that happened years ago.
Kelly's got her hand up.
Yeah, I would just note that some employer units, like I know for the counties, which we qualify, which the employees qualify through APCHA, they are a sliding scale, so whatever the income is of the person that lives there, that's the rent they pay. That's not attached to a land use decision though. But it wouldn't, so there's other employee units out here. I mean, related to the bogeyman, I feel like there's also other units which have requirements to house people, and the compliance gets really tricky with that. That aren't employer designated units. So like EDU, employer, like instead of an ADU, an EDU, where they're required to have an employee in it. We don't always know if those people do. I mean, that's, that in itself is a compliance issue.
And we could add a part in here that says only units that were built prior to X date, so that not everyone coming forward is only trying to get category 1. I think it ties a little bit into the AMI discussion scheduled for February, in a sense of, in 1980, category 1 worked, and it has not kept up to 2023. And so category 1 was designed for your entry-level teller, in a sense, but it's not, it hasn't matched.
Also, we have half our inventory, 1,600 units, whatever it is, that are ownership, that people got in at a certain category, and they don't have to maintain that category. So I feel like for employers, it's not quite fair that they have to keep, if their employee is in that unit and they're not giving them raises or helping them move up because they have to keep their housing and keep that category level, it's not good.
That's the thing too, would that enter into your discussion about getting a raise?
What's that? Yeah.
Right? Oh, don't give me a raise, I would have to move out.
I mean, I had
That's
a
scary.
conversation with a business owner this weekend that said, I've got an employee in affordable housing, and he's afraid to make too much money, and he will go out and he will not bill the customer. And, I've had the conversation that, not only is he not making money, then I'm not making money, right? So, I mean, it's, like I say, it's a problem. I just, personally, I'm not comfortable just lifting. I mean, I see this as lifting all the deed restrictions off all employer owned units, and from an income standpoint.
For everyone this affects, I think they're going to roll their eyes, but I wonder if this could be pulled from this slate of regulation changes and come after AMI, because I absolutely agree with you that, Cat 1 comes up to our entry-level jobs minus 20%. All of a sudden, these units are relevant again without changing the standing deed.
Okay.
I agree.
I
All
think
right,
you've
we
got employers now that have employees that they need to put in these units.
Yep. And they will in February too. Like,
I agree with you. I just
We're going into the ski season, and a season when they need to be hiring.
Do we know how many cases there are like this that quantify the number?
This doesn't benefit anybody but the employee.
And that's
Right,
what, I
this
mean,
doesn't benefit the employer because they're not charging more rent. And the math problem probably isn't a big deal to a lot of employees. But I feel like, I mean, this is one that should be addressed.
I agree, and if we wanted to, like I said, if we wanted to put in an emergency, to allow people a 1-year exception, I mean, that, I would do something like that, but just to say,
Well, why don't you put that in with the idea that we'll address it after AMI?
I mean, I would support that.
After the affordability discussion.
That's what I said, right?
Well, I guess, no, so what he's saying is for the
just
people
go.
with units right now, just to keep this as is and say, they can apply for a 1-year exception.
Well, ideally, this applies to no one right now because no one's cheating right now, right? Like, this would, everyone,
Well, in theory, then you got, I mean, no one's cheating, but you got X number of units empty. You don't know the number.
Yeah, the last thing you want is vacant
Right.
units.
Right.
Yeah.
So, are we gonna pull it? Are we gonna put a short-term exception on there?
Well, if we put a short-term exception until we revisit
Yeah.
in February, then it allows some of those units to get rented.
So keep it as is, but just allow an employer to apply with APCHA for a 1-year exception. To put an employee of a higher category in, still keeping the same lower category with our understanding that we're gonna try
that need to go in the
and leases
regulations?
not
No,
to
we don't need to
exceed
put
1
that
year.
piece
Okay,
in,
great.
but
Yeah.
what was
And
that?
leases not to exceed 1 year, like they're gonna sign a lease.
Yeah, leases can never sign a
Yeah.
1-year,
Okay.
so, okay.
all right, so we got just a few minutes here and we're halfway through, so
I think we can move relatively quickly, to be honest, through the rest. Oh, well, I say that and I laugh. Next slide, right sizing. The board requested that we add back in the statement that staff originally proposed, which is occupancy -1 for an individual downsizing, just to put us all in the same page. We have had one successful right sizing application because for the most part we have single individuals in 3-bedroom or single family homes that only want a 2-bedroom. Will not go down any further.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay, so I asked this last week too. Trying to understand, this is my ignorance. Occupancy -1, what does that mean?
So a single individual could have a 2-bedroom. Normally 2 people need to be in a 2-bedroom.
So you're talking, okay.
So
I get it now.
so essentially it's single person could get a 2-bedroom
If they're in a 3-bedroom.
if they're in a 3-bedroom or a single family home if they're downsizing.
Okay.
For the purpose
they're
of the
creating
downsizing
bedrooms.
program.
So we're talking, okay. I
So
was
it's a
thinking
one-bedroom
occupancy
getting
-1,
off.
I'm thinking somebody -1 bedroom, what does that mean? So that's my own
anybody
interpretation.
opposed to
Yes,
this?
it's the bedroom.
I guess my tweak would, I guess I was thinking more like we would change the dependent age to like the federal dependent age, and not as much as allow someone to get a known empty bedroom in perpetuity. I hear how you are saying that it has not been successful to date. I think it is. I'm not going to stop it from going in the discussion the next time, but it's definitely something I'll have to think really hard about, because for me, the issue is more like when it is parents who have a kid who likely will be spending time coming back for summers and holidays and want a bedroom. You know, they're between age 19 and 26. I get that you want the bedroom. If they're a student, maybe they take a gap year, those kind of things where you want your other family member back in your house. I get having a bedroom, even if we know it's empty while they're a student. Knowingly giving someone, because that also means a couple gets a 3-bedroom.
Only if they had a 4-bedroom or larger house. Well, I mean, right, I think the idea was to create some churn and get units to turn. And so, I mean, if somebody did have a house, single family house, and they moved down to a 3-bedroom condo, I think that's a question.
1 a bedroom.
The net bedroom gain is
Right.
still
I mean, we were shooting for
Bedroom.
2, and that hasn't worked, so now we're gonna shoot for 1.
Yeah,
And the problem is we have no other way to incentivize that person to downsize
correct.
from a
Right.
single
Yeah.
family home, and they just stay in it as is.
And I have
will
a
we-
couple. I have a couple that would do, like a couple people that would go down, but I can't give them I can't give them anything.
Will we have the discussion another time about the dependence age? I know there was a long discussion that I'd love to learn more about at some point.
That was the-
Our resource? All right.
Well, what about just a net bedroom gain across the board? Right, not so much, I mean, if you want to create churn, you might have a couple that's in a 4-bedroom. You got a 3-bedroom unit, you're still getting a net bedroom gain out of the whole thing. And you're not going to,
Okay.
or you might have a, I don't know, you might have a 5-bedroom house that there's a family that really needs it. And you're going to a 4-bedroom, but you got a couple, you're getting a net bedroom gain in that exchange.
I'm in support of that.
I mean, they're
Churn.
downsizing, that's
Yeah.
the key term, and I get it.
But they're
you know,
booting a
but-
family of 4 who would have been next on that lottery, you know.
But
They're
they're
not going
not selling their house.
But they're not going to sell their house anyway.
If that house isn't available,
Right.
unless we're trying to make it available, but it's not available.
Great news is we get new deed restrictions on these as they change. So any change is good. Brand new deed restriction gets slapped on.
I'm just trying to make it easy,
I'm-
because I
I'm-
do worry about your point of, 19, we were trying to move it, so kids
Right.
going off to college, somebody wasn't going into a better,
Right,
bigger
and I
unit,
understand
right?
that.
I would support that, just the net bedroom gain.
Okay. I will change that for next time. We can keep talking about it next time too. Next one, clarification to conveyances outside the bid process. So this is when something doesn't have to
Sorry.
go.
Can I just clarify? I thought that, so this occupancy definition applies to everything, and we're just adding language specific to right sizing.
This is the right sizing occupancy definition.
Correct.
This just applies to right sizing.
So does the occupancy dependence definition for the rest of the regs match this?
No, because yes and no. I mean, no in that we don't use the word upsizing or downsizing in the normal definition section of a dependent. We consider a dependent of 19 or less throughout the rest of the APCHA regs. But what got approved for the right sizing addition was the dependent age was 16 if you are upsizing and 19 if you're downsizing.
But Bethany,
Okay,
you have
thank you.
occupancy requirements to qualify for any unit in another
Correct.
section of
Yes.
the regs.
Yes.
But what I'd proposed, though, was that we were creating a bedroom
Yes.
and taking out that,
So just saying no
Dependent.
occupancy requirement, net bedroom gain,
Yeah.
proceed.
you're getting a net bedroom gain, so you're getting some kind of
Yep.
benefit.
Getting some.
Okay.
And you were gonna get a churn out of a bigger unit to somebody that really probably needed it, and somebody else that was willing to at least give
Does-
up a bedroom.
Yeah.
Okay, we
for
can
lack of
rewrite
a
that.
better-
Yeah.
Okay. Chanson moving forward. The next one is clarification to conveyances outside the bid process. So right now you can not go through the bid process if you are selling to a child, siblings in there, or maybe you're adding your spouse's name to the title. APCHA is staff's requesting that we add just a really nice thing that says changing title of an ownership unit to a trust or a corporate entity is not permitted. This is very clear, we think, throughout the deed restriction and the regs, but just really putting in a statement that we can point back to at all times. So it's how we currently operate.
I
Just
thought it was already in there.
This would not be a change because the definition of qualified buyer is a natural
correct.
person.
This is
But it makes it clear without having to go to look at the individual document.
yes.
So this is, how about the other side, in the exclusionary zone, if somebody's doing estate planning and they want to put their child on in a trust, the child owns a unit, and they're put as, their parents' unit is put into a trust, but does that make them disqualified for owning a unit because they're not, as long as their parent's alive,
Yeah.
they don't have ownership of it.
As long as there's no benefit to the applicant or owner until point of death, so if it transfers at time of death, then that is likely acceptable. We usually just ask to see the trust documents. Tommy, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But if they have any ability to access that property prior to point of death, they are they're not qualified.
I mean, they can't visit their
We have
parents.
Their parents can't go retire and they get their
Board,
parents
we
in the
have,
house.
we spent a lot of time on this issue last year, I think it was. We had, we found out that, staff found out that there were a number of people who were conveying properties to, putting them in the names of trusts. And that is not allowed by the terms of the deed restrictions, which require that properties have to be owned by natural persons who are qualified buyers. And it's not, we don't need to go into great detail now, but I'm happy to discuss it later. The requirement that there be natural person owners is consistent with the need to be able to enforce the deed restriction as to employment, residency, and other requirements. A trust, because of the nature, as an entity, a trust, for example, can't be an occupant. It can't be employed. So allowing entities to own these units creates a whole set of complications that we haven't been willing to get into, and so far people have accepted that interpretation, which is actually pretty clear.
Yeah, it's my concern is not for the owner of an APCHA unit, but an APCHA owner being added to a trust to, say, a parent's unit.
Oh, but the parent's not an APCHA.
The parent's not an APCHA. Parent has free market. The parent wants to do trust
and-
planning.
So as long as the APCHA owner does not have any right to that property until time of death of the parent, then it would be allowed. But we review the document to make sure there's no ability to access, whether it's money or when they're applying to figure out their category, or making sure the house doesn't transfer until time of death.
So if it were, let me just finish on this.
It's called, I think, a spillover or a...
I hear what you're saying, and I think it is a problem. Yeah, it's a problem that that's not allowed.
Yeah, transfer on death, thank you.
Yeah, so if at time of death, then the person has to make a decision, and they're going to sell their APCHA unit and move in, or sell the unit they just
They
inherited.
have 6 months.
So someone who grew up in Aspen in a free market house, their parents are alive, they are working, they're meeting all qualifications, 1,500 hours, their W-2 for Pitkin County cannot be part of the APCHA system because they're in their parents' will?
No, they can be.
No.
I said it just has to transfer at time
No,
of
I'm sorry,
death.
sorry.
That's not it.
Because they're in their parent, but like, what if their parents get old and they want to move to Florida? Like if the
They have to
house,
sell it.
they would have to sell their APCHA, but they can bid for an APCHA even if they're listed as like, okay.
Yeah, they just can't be listed as the owner or have rights to it right now. It's not like they can...
They can't have a present ownership,
right to
use
it.
or ownership interest.
kind of a future.
Okay. That's a little tangential though. This is talking about taking an APCHA unit and putting it into a trust.
Correct, Kelly.
This is a little, this is different than what we're talking about.
Yeah, Kelly I acknowledge that it's the opposite side of the, but it's something that has come to my attention, and I wanted to try to get clarity on it.
Once that person actually inherits another property in the OEZ, then they own an APCHA unit and another unit, and they gotta make a decision.
They have 180 days. So, okay. I'm going to keep us moving if Carson's okay with
let's go
this.
to
I'm going to try to
complex priority.
slide. So this was a board request that in-complex bidders can qualify for a unit at their category or above. Currently, it's
To their category plus.
it's restricted to their category +1. So if they're category 2, they could only bid on a category 2 or category 3. But what we're saying is if they're category 2, they could bid on category 3, 4.
Well, what it is if somebody's, and we heard comment on this, so if somebody's in a category 4 already, and say they're in a 2-bedroom in a category 4 and a 3-bedroom category 4 next door comes available, but they're not currently category 4, but if they could qualify for a loan, it would just allow them to go in complex. If they're already category 4, and it would allow them to go in complex too.
What if they're Cat 5? Right. You have it
Right.
stated in our packet here, in complex bidders can qualify at any category at or below the
Above.
category of the unit listed below, and then on the other one you say
Above.
in complex bidders can qualify at
Sorry.
unit or above. Okay, so
Apologize.
if you got into your complex with various categories throughout the complex as a Cat 2, you're now earning Cat 5. A nicer Cat 2 opens up. You cannot bid on that. It's yours or above.
Mm-hmm.
Any above though, not just the one.
Yeah.
Lovely.
So that's a change in from our
Lovely.
normal regs.
All right.
Move it forward.
Prohibition on home trades.
Yeah, and Tom, I know you want me to change the definition on this, and I can do that. So what we're talking about is we've gotten a few calls where someone has said, hey, I want to go to South Africa, and I'm going to swap my home with someone for a month, and they're going to come live in my APCHA unit for a month, and I'm going to go live in their APCHA, in their home for a month. And what we've said is, hey, that's not allowed. Like you have to be an employee of Pitkin County as well as of a lot of other things within Pitkin County to qualify for a housing. And so what we're adding in is just it's a reactive statement, I will give it that, but owners are not allowed to trade their homes with other homeowners, whether here or located someplace else for rental purposes, even if no money changes hands. So this is very much attributed to the person who wants to swap homes for a period of time.
When they travel, they'd love to be able to stay for free, and the only way you to be at those type of websites is to have yours on listed too. So that's like, you don't get to have access to that as a subsidized house resident. I wonder if it could be 7 days or less or something like that a year, so that locals can go on vacation just like everyone else. But
I'm not comfortable with that.
I'm not comfortable with that. People will start to take advantage of it. And we
yeah, I
won't
don't know
know.
how you
I
can
don't know
do
what
it.
I'm gonna do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The people who do it now, is that causing problems?
I don't think anyone does. We've gotten a few phone calls of asking, and I've said, no, it's not allowed because you can't rent your unit. And they say, well, great, show me the exact provision in the regulations. And while I show them a lot, none is clearly as spelled out as this. And so it is a little bit like we talked about earlier, like, hey, this is why you can't.
Yeah.
It's clearly spelled out.
Now, Bethany, don't most of the deed restrictions have rental provisions that say you can rent if you get approval from APCHA?
Yes.
Yes.
But this isn't necessarily rental. This is
It's
just
an in-kind rental.
an in-kind rental. Thank you, Carson.
I know situations where
Well, technically, this is rental. I mean,
Yeah.
if you're letting somebody in your unit on a temporary basis, whether it's for consideration or not, that's a rental.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they would be able to do that in a situation where they're doing their, like the 1 year sabbatical type thing where the
They
person who's
take a leave
coming
of
in
absence, they
works
have to
full
rent
time
it to a
here
qualified
locally.
employee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still maintains that. Okay.
So I just want a little more clear. So if I'm out of town and I tell friends from Denver to stay in my unit, they can't do that, even though
I'm
there's
okay. No, I'm fine with that. This is
Not a
very.
trade.
It's not a trade. This is very much
Yeah.
There are trade websites where you can list your unit
Okay.
and find a match in a different part of the world or country and say, I want to spend Christmas in France and you want to spend Christmas in Aspen. So we will trade our units for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, who knows, and live in each other's units.
It's a benefit.
It's a benefit. It's just,
Why don't we, Bethany?
yeah.
Would it work to just say that? Would it work to just describe that as a rental that is subject to the applicable requirements of
Sure.
the deed restriction?
Yeah, we can do that.
I mean, that way you could fold it into the current procedure.
Yep. If the board's acceptable to that.
Works for me.
Wow. Okay, the last two I think are pretty easy. So staff is recommending making one change to the hearing officer provision, which is that currently the decision has to be made in 30 days, and staff is recommending 60 days. And the reason that staff is recommending this is the way the regs were written, the hearing officer is supposed to make a decision within 30 days, and if it is appealed to the board, the transcript is supposed to be produced, which means we send it off to Denver, to a firm that listens to the hearing and types it all up, and then the board gets to see this transcript. What has been happening is that in order to make a detailed and more informed decision, the transcript has been requested to be prepared before it is appealed to the board. So APCHA sends out the transcript the day of, and we can usually get a rush job sometime between 14 business days, and our most recent one was 45 days for a transcript to be produced. That obviously does not allow for a hearing decision to be written in 30 days normally. Historically, or what we've seen is both sides have been fine with that extension because they have wanted the transcript themselves. But staff is recommending changing it to 60 days so that this doesn't happen.
Carson, I have to go.
I'm good with this. Does anybody?
Well,
I guess we can.
our issue was, I think, not with the length,
You can go
but
ahead. Allison and I we still have we're good.
Okay.
the word shall changing to
Yeah.
must, and you guys tell us what is a reasonable amount of day. The days is irrelevant to me. I think we just want someone to know when they can count on a decision by.
So it's 60 days, and we can talk to Tom a little bit about the shall versus must and bring you back what we want. But that is really what the change was. So we can come up with that. Sorry, I'm trying to get you out of here.
And
I agree,
I'll add that,
I think
I'll
we need to
add
read
that
about
it's
the
pretty,
transcript.
it's quite reasonable in terms of how long judges take to make decisions in
Okay.
these kinds of situations, so.
And we can, Allison, bring back a must or a shall for first reading. Okay.
I do think regulations are like the one thing that we have the most robust role in, and so if we need two discussion periods in the future or longer meetings or something like that, I don't need to be rushed out of a regulation discussion. Some of these things are so fascinating to me, and this is the first time we're hearing about them, so I appreciate the time spent to explain the back end of these situations so we can make informed decisions when we make permanent changes to our regulations that affect everybody.
I think we've had a couple that were, really there were two that took up the bulk of the time.
Okay. I
And
am
so then
prepared
our
to bring them
last
back.
one is
The last
trusts.
one, I apologize. It's really the same idea. It's it's aligning it with these 60 days that we just talked through above, and reducing some duplication. So, and then the last one is
for the trusts.
Yeah, just
and so
making
this
some
this would just
clarification.
allow if there was a
And I've made the suggestion that we shouldn't just leave it open-ended, that there should be some kind of criteria for making that decision so that there's guidance to the either the hearing officer or the board for what they're going to consider when they're
and so this is
evaluating a request for an exemption.
yeah. So and this is specific to people who are the beneficiary of a trust and having their assets count towards their total amount. So
Correct.
I'm good with that one as well.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay, so any other thoughts or discussion on regulations?
Kelly's right.
Kelly?
Kelly's waving.
Not waving goodbye just yet. I do think some of these will merit getting feedback from my board, which I will do between now and the next discussion. Honey, please be quiet a sec. And but Bethany, sorry, it would be super helpful if you could send me or the whole board if they want the PowerPoint slides, because I think it'll help for me to share those with the BOCC.
Sure.
Sounds good. Take a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Easy.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Second.
You had to think about that.
That's enough to say.
Allison just wants to camp out.
I
for
don't
a
want to
little
take all the seconds. They're the most fun part.
while. And it's a roll call vote.
Okay. Kelly?
Oh, that's yours.
Yes?
Yes, thank you.
Ward?
Yes.
Allison?
Yes.
Carson?
Yes, meeting
John.
adjourned 6:41.
I don't need my sunglasses.